Kentaro Yamada, the protagonist, lives with his beloved cat Nini and dog Max. Kentaro treated the two like cherished family, worked in sales for a major electronics company and was doing well, and one morning brought breakfast to Max and Nini. He had lost his parents in a tragic accident many years ago, and now only Max and Nini are by his side. After feeding them, Kentaro has a cup of tea before making himself a delicious meal. As he bites into it, he is surprised by how good the food is. Then he asks Max and Nini if they have finished eating. After breakfast, he exercises with his pets and talks to them about his work. It's not a hobby, but he enjoys it. After that, he tells him both that it's time for a walk. Walking together, Kentaro sees how much Max and Nini enjoy their walks, but he doubts Nini truly counts as a walker because her steps are so slow and deliberate. When approaching a crosswalk, the roar of an approaching truck suddenly fills the air, and before Kentaro can react, it strikes him. Everything goes black. With his eyes closed, Kentaro hears someone say there's a problem. It felt like things were meant to turn out differently. He wakes in a strange place, wearing unfamiliar clothes and hearing an annoying voice. Bright sunlight lies ahead. Kentaro looks around and spots vibrant flowers and towering mountains in the distance. A rush of joy hits him when he sees the wide, clear sky. He inspects his eyewear. Now wondering if he's dreaming, he begins to question everything. A voice calls out asking whether Kentaro can hear it. Kenta glanced over his shoulder and was surprised to see a squirrel sitting there. A squirrel approached and greeted him. They explained that Kenta was now dead. As the squirrel faded away, Kenta asked what it meant. The squirrel said calmly that he had died in an accident. Shocked, Kenta said he had been there, while the squirrel said the world was on the brink of collapse and needed saving, and that it had resurrected him as a token of gratitude. Because of his role in stepping into this reality, everything had been mended, the world he came from was stable, and his presence alone brought harmony. But when the squirrel asked if he understood, Kenta, still confused, said he did not fully grasp what was happening. The squirrel explained that Kent, a rival in this world, had helped save it and now had to live here happily. Before Kenta could react, the squirrel disappeared. Standing up, Kent muttered that the squirrel should have explained things more clearly instead of leaving him there. At that moment, he turned. He saw a bag beside him. Curious, he opened it and found water, a blanket, a rain poncho, and 6 small bags of golden and silver coins lay there, and he wondered if they were the currency of this new world. There was also dried meat, vegetables, and a small box tucked away. Some foods cannot be tried. The taste was delicious and sweet. He chose to savor it slowly. When he finished, he rummaged through another bag and found dry beans, fruit, crackers, rock salt, and coffee beans. While examining the bag, Kenta found a lantern and an oil lighter, a pot set, a small stove and kettle, plates, cups, spoons, and forks. Finding a percolator, he wondered if he could brew coffee with it, because it looked like the same one he used in school and made him question what was really happening. Grateful for the useful items, he still hadn't found any underwear, but he figured he could probably camp out with what he had. His gaze fell on a ball. That reminded him of Max and Nini. He worried about the two of them and whether he would ever see them again to make them happy. A wave of disappointment hit him when he realized he might never see them again. That made him decide to move forward. A beast appeared in the distance without warning. Panic flooded him as it raced toward him. Kent ran at once, but the beast was too fast. He reached for his sword. The creature closed the distance to him. Panicked, Kendra stumbled and fell to the ground. He was sure he was going to die here. He feared his second life would be over before it really began, but as he braced for the worst, the beast began to lick him, surrounding him with warmth and affection. The beast surprised him by speaking and calling him master. He froze, stared in disbelief, and then to his astonishment heard a familiar voice. It was Max. Then it was confirmed that it really was him. Explained that he was about to be taken to a shelter and thanked Kenta for saving him. Remembering the past overwhelmed Kenta. Max had been his late boss's beloved dog, and memories flooded back as Kent felt deep relief at being reunited with his loyal companion. At the funeral home, a woman mentioned that since no one had adopted Max, they would be sending him to the shelter. Kent stopped dwelling on the past and apologized for taking Max away so suddenly, and Max reassured him it was no problem and that he was happy. Now they would repay their master for his kindness. Kenta still wants to know what Max meant. He was startled when a giant cat appeared and began licking him. The cat said she would never forget being rescued from the cold. Kenta froze when he realized the cat was Nini. He remembered finding Nini, a stray cat, in the company parking lot. After some discussion, he took Nini in. Nini struggled to adjust when Max arrived first. Nini called Kenta her beloved master and promised she would always protect him no matter what. Moved, Kenta hugged her and marveled at how fluffy her fur was. He was thrilled to be reunited with his two beloved pets. At that moment, the squirrel reappeared and said he would explain many things. Somewhat frustrated, Kenta told the squirrel not to leave things lying around in a place like that. Calm and unbothered, the squirrel said he had prepared the needed gear for them, suggested they gather or buy any extra items, and added that money was available though they'd still need to earn some. Shaml the squirrel pointed to the mountains and said a road there leads to the big cities, suggesting they go and join the Adventurers Guild as Beastmasters. Thinking about the guild and the title Beastmaster, Ken couldn't shake the feeling he was in an RPG. Curious, he asked Shaml whether he understood Kent's concerns, especially about how difficult reading is in this new world. Shaml assured him that every race in this world used a common language and that she had already adjusted the system so Kenta could understand it. Relief washed over Kenta as he realized he'd managed somehow. Shaml went on to explain that this world was a parallel one, slightly shifted from their own. Kenta said aloud he wasn't sure it was real and that it didn't seem very different from his own world. Shaml said no world could ever be completely safe and that risks existed even here. Kenta wondered whether he had the freedom to live in this world without fixed roles or quotas, and whether he could live peacefully with Max and Nini. Shaml reassured him that he could. Kent could buy a house and settle down somewhere, or if he preferred, become a top-ranked beastmaster, take on disciples, and live however he wanted. A sense of freedom can make you decide to travel and explore this new world. Samuel Delasha introduced himself formally, said he would watch over them for a while, and assured Kenta they could call on him if they needed help. Kenta laughed, saying Samuel's name sounded rather grand. Shem will say that he was, in fact, the creator of this world. Kenta treated Channel's revelation casually, trying to understand the meaning behind that imagination. Sensing Kent's skepticism, Samuel said Kent did not believe him and explained he had made his form cute for a reason. In an instant, shame will turn into a huge dragon. Ken jumped back in fear and shame, and someone who saw his reaction explained that he could take any form he wished. Samuel roared and unleashed a flame attack that briefly engulfed the area in fire. After the flames died down, he shifted back into Kenta's form. Disguised as Kenta, Samuel approached, and a startled Kenta asked him to change back to his original form. Chuckling, Samuel shifted back into his familiar squirrel shape. Shaml explained this world had many races besides humans, including magical beasts and gem monsters, and that defeated gem monsters turned into gems. Kenta asked what the gems were for. Shaml said each monster's core was a gem that acted as its fuel, and when the monsters were defeated, they turned back into those gems. Kenta, curious about the difference between magical beasts and gem monsters, asked a question. Shaml explained that gem monsters didn't have physical bodies and turned into gems when defeated. In contrast, magical beasts were living creatures with bodies that could be captured for various materials. Shaml told Kent to gather meat, skin, bones, organs, and more, and said both gem monsters and magical beasts could be sold at the guild. Using Kent's Beastmaster abilities, he could make them his allies. Kent said it sounded great. Shaml suggested recruiting a slime for his journey, and the moment he said it, he disappeared. Ken noted that Shaml was very elusive, then he started to wonder about the slime. Max suggested Ken ride on his back because it would be faster and safer. When Ken asked if he was really okay with it, Max reassured him. Kent fell onto his back. Max told him to hold on tight so he would not fall while they moved. Then Max started running. Kenta was thrilled by the speed and called it amazing. Max said they were heading to the Slimest now. After a day of running, they entered a forest where Samuel said the world was full of places gym monsters spawned, making it perfect for monster hunting. At last, they found the slime nest. Shaml said these nests were common along the ley lines. Kenta wondered whether it had been hard to get this far. He then asked about the people of this world. Shaml will reply, asking if Kenta did not know the world was on the brink of collapse. He noted that even if some people know about it, they would not take action. The situation could suddenly get worse and leave everyone shocked. Kenta said it seemed careless. They decided not to dwell on it. Standing up, he said the slimes were spawning in huge numbers. He wondered whether Max and Nini felt intimidated by them. Max said they would keep their distance for now. Shaml will appear on Kenta's shoulder, reassure him not to worry and say he is strong, then suggest Kenta think of it as a tutorial and battle the slimes with confidence, while Kenta wondered what kind of game this was. Shaml said it was just to teach him the basic controls. Then Kenter struck a slide and encountered a German side. Shaml warned him not to cut the slimes yet, since they needed to be weakened first. Kent said quietly that Shaml should have mentioned that earlier. He hit a second slime to weaken it further. They picked it up as it tried to run away. Kenta asked Shaml how to handle the slime, and Shaml said Kenta must speak to it and ask it to join him to tame it. Kent agreed and invited the slime that wanted to join his party. The slime agreed happily and greeted Kenta as master. Ken should mention that the voice sounded so cute and unique. He even wondered where it had come from. Shaml told him to keep holding the slime. When Kenta acted, the slime granted him the abilities to store, preserve, and purify, and promised to work hard. Kenta thought this might be like leveling up. Shaml said Kenta was close to the answer. Kenta wanted to know more about the slime's abilities. Shaml explained that storage could hold anything not alive. Preservation kept items from breaking down. Then he asked Quinta to put the gem he had collected earlier into the slime. Inside Kent's body, the slime settled and said it could store as much as its master wanted and retrieve items whenever needed. Shaml continued, saying purification would remove dirt, and Kenta asked if it was like doing laundry. She remarked that being able to keep anything clean and fresh was an impressive skill. Still, he began to worry it was only suitable for storing monster corpses and might not work for food, and Shaml reassured him that he was worrying needlessly since he could simply purify everything. Kenta should take good care of the slime mask. Later, Kent picked up another slime and said it was fine, the clear one named Aqua and the light pink one named Sakura. Sakura would handle food tasks, with Aqua taking care of everything else, and Shaml said their teamwork was going well so far. Kent asked how much longer it would take to reach the town. Shaml said that if they walked steadily, they might arrive by the next evening, but if they ran, they would reach the town that same night. Kenta hesitated about camping here. Shaml reassured him that his pets would keep most monsters away. Shamingo noted the sun was still high overhead and suggested they try something bigger. Kenta pointed at a bird but hesitated because it looked so big. Shaml said Kenta had caught things quickly before. Thinking of training the hawk, Samuel urged them to go. Kenta hesitated, noting the hawk was large in flight, making it appear impossible to catch. A hawk flew overhead, causing Ken to flinch. He wondered whether birds that large actually existed. Shaml told Kenta to act as the decoy and pointed at Max and Ninny. Max and Ninny agreed who would be his backup, but Kenta was reluctant to be the decoy. Don't worry, Shaml reassured him it was only a tutorial, and Kenta asked how long it would last. Ninny spoke up that if Kenta was left alone and the hawk attacked, she'd knock it down, leaving him to tame it. He thought that sounded risky. When the hawk drew closer, he felt both excited and afraid and asked Max and Ninny to protect him. Finally, the hawk swooped down to attack Kenta. Ninny struck first, knocking the hawk to the ground. Max then attacks the hawk too. Shaml told Kenta to tame it right away. Ken asked the hawk if it wanted to join the party. The hawk agreed to follow him. Once tamed, the hawk shrank and landed on Kent's hand. She introduced herself as Falco. She told him she could grow big enough to carry him and that it was nice to meet him. Shaml told Kenta he had tamed his first 5 pets and now needed to create his beast master emblem. Kenta wondered if there were other types of emblems. Samuel said the emblem was a mark showing he had acquired the creatures, and that monsters with the emblem could be told apart from others once they were attacked. Shaml refused to write the page in pen, went to Kenta, and asked him to create an emblem that suited him. Kenta agreed and drew one. After I showed it to Shaml asked him to pick a name. Kenta suggested Kintaro Yamada. Shaml replied that most people didn't have surnames, so a nickname would be more fitting. Ken then suggested Ken. Shaml nodded, said his name, made something appear in the air, and asked Kentat to show his hand. Shaml then places the item in Kindy's hand. After that, Shaml told Kenta to press his favorite spot on the emblem. When Kenta did, the emblem imprinted on the spot he touched. When night fell, Kent chose to camp there. After sitting down, he thought about lighting the lantern and wondered if it was new and had oil or any fuel. Shame will ask Aqua to put the earlier gem into the lighter, then say he'll give another one for the lantern. Has Kenta put one gem in the lighter and the other in the lantern. He noticed the lighter was working again. He was amazed because it was so fun, and the gems really seemed to act as fuel. Shamble said the gems came from mana, the life force that runs through all living things, including their bodies, and that if men ran out of it, they would die. Kenta wondered whether they needed anything besides food, and Shane told him food was all they needed, and the Johns would keep them fed for a few days. Max and Ninny said they would hunt on their own and absorb mana from the monsters they defeated. Kenta was amazed and said how incredible it was, thinking about how they once depended on him, which gave him relief but also a touch of loneliness. Caring for creatures meant holding their lives in his hands. He said his meal was dried meat and dried vegetables. Rock salt and water. All his pets were asleep. Kenta enjoyed his meal. They said it was a mystery how simple meat and vegetables could taste so good. At dessert, he took out a treat and found it was still full. He ate it even though he'd had won the day before. Shem will explain that this was called the logic bonus, which we increased by 1 each day, and will note that it was easy to handle. Nearby, a slime began cleaning the area, and Kenta was impressed. He said it was his first night in this new world. Looking back, he worried he might have caused trouble for his boss, colleagues, and friends. Fortunately, it seemed you could enjoy yourself in this new world. He hoped the people in his old world were doing well. Shaml will Kenta up. Kent yawned and stretched as Ninny greeted him. Just then Max started licking him, saying he hadn't woken up at all, and I can't agree with Max. He said he wanted to wash his face and body, but the town was too far away. A sticky slime clung to his body and left him feeling strange. He asked what Sakura was up to. He then noticed his skin had become incredibly smooth and wondered if this was the purification process. He thanked Sakura and said he'd be counting on her again. Ken realized he couldn't resist a morning cup of coffee. It had been ages since he'd used a percolator. He still hadn't checked the coffee beans. He looked at his water bottle and was surprised to find it completely full. Even though he used some of it the day before, Sham will explain that the water bottle refills itself over time. Kenta was amazed and said it was incredibly convenient but a little scary, and Shamble asked him to share more information. Kenta replied, explaining that humans can survive about a week without food, but only a few days without water, referring to the water bottle as a life-giving tool. While making coffee, the boiling water turned brown, indicating it was ready. After you make the coffee, Kent took a sip and found it unexpectedly mild, even lighter than drip coffee. He checked his bag and considered heading to the highway. At that moment, he grabbed his hand and pulled him along. Ken was to ask what Ninny was doing. He was surprised to see Ninny with a snake in her mouth. He became frightened and told her to stay back. Shame will explain that humans were vulnerable to poison and will advise Kenta to tame the snake. Kenta immediately refused, not wanting to touch the snake. Sham will push him to act quickly. Trembling couldn't have touched the snake's head with his fingertip and asked it to join their party. The snake agreed, then suddenly grew larger. Kenton gave it the name Serpent and greeted it. Afterward, he stamps her pants. Making the snake shrink to a small size, he said it looked cute that way. Serpan said he would try to hide as much as possible and apologized in advance, while Ken reassured the snake that in its small form it was not scary at all. Shamalt told Kenta that Shamalt had transformed Serpan into a top-tier poison type, a large green python, and Kenta said large poisonous snakes were scary. Shamalt reassured him, saying not to worry because Serpan would keep the other snakes far away. Kenta nodded, suggested they refocus, and when Ninny offered to let him ride on her back, he agreed. She started running as he climbed onto Ninny and told him to hold on tight. They moved so fast Kent felt like he was riding Max. Kent then asked Ninny to run more gently. At last they reached the main road and saw a carriage carrying several people. Cantor said the town must be nearby. He walked up to the group with his pets. Onlookers were shocked to see the creatures. Seeing their fear, Kenta quickly explained these were his tame creatures and told them not to attack. A man drew his sword to defend himself. Another observer said he had never seen such beasts before and was particularly interested in the Red King and the Hellhound variants. A third man spoke up, said no one kept such beasts, and asked Kenta what kind of beastmaster he was. Shemuel turned to Kenta and quietly explained that beastmasters were rare in this world now. Kenta, somewhat puzzled. Someone asked whether this meant the world was collapsing. Shamble said it would take a long time to fix. Kenta calmed them and said everything would be fine, then told them to put their swords away. He asked if someone could guide him to the town, and one of the men asked if Kenta was going to rest him. Kenta agreed, still confused. As they walked, he overheard the group talking about the creatures and guessing how others would react. Kenta wondered whether he should have stayed hidden. Then the man asked where Kenta had come from and requested to see his ID. Someone will step in and advise Kenta to tell them he was from the Shadow-Cut Mountains. Kenta repeated it, and the group was taken aback. After a short apology for the delay, they hope he has a safe journey. Leaving, Kenta kept thinking about the Shadow-Cut Mountains. Shaml explained it was a jungle full of incredibly powerful monsters. Bathed in leyline energy, the area was home to legendary and mysterious species, and ordinary adventurers tended to avoid it. Ken said it sounded terrifying and feared such a dangerous place would drive people away. Sham replied that the beasts Ken had detained were extraordinarily strong, so there was nothing to worry about. Reassuring Kenta, he said that if he ever felt unsure, he should just say he was from there, which would ease people's fears, and they continued their journey. And has spotted a town in the distance. Someone wondered aloud if Restam existed, and Shamil confirmed it did. They walked down a road that looked safe, but other travelers grew nervous when they saw them. When they reached the town gate, the guards greeted them politely. A guard pointed out the size of Kenta's summoned beasts and looked ready to act. Kenta calmly said they were his summoned beasts. The guard asked to see Kenta's ID. Kenta admitted he didn't have one. The gardener said the entry fee was 1 silver coin per person and 1 copper coin for each large animal, and Kent asked about Falco's fee, and the guard said Falco would not be charged. After you hand over the required coins, the guard reminded Kenta to be careful managing his summoned beasts, and he nodded in agreement. When they entered the town, villagers looked terrified when they saw Kenta and his creatures. Ken said he hadn't expected the town to be so large based on the walls he'd seen earlier, and it felt more like a tourist spot. His top priority, he figured, was to find the Adventurers Guild. Shaml, however, admitted he had no idea where it was. Disappointed, Kenta muttered to himself that he would have to handle everything on his own from now on. At that moment, the man he had seen earlier on the path came back into view. A man recognized him, said he was from the Adventurers Guild, and asked if Kenta wanted to join. Ken said he had been looking for the guild, and the man offered to show him around, so Ken asked why the man was so interested in helping him. The man said he was intrigued by Kenti's familiars, and since Kent hailed from the Shadow-Cut Mountains, saw them as fellow adventurers. The man noted that Kentis seemed a bit naive, and he decided it was the perfect time to take advantage of the situation. Kenta chuckled and said the man was very straightforward. He shook the man's hand, accepted his offer of help, and introduced himself while the man said his name was Hector. They arrived at the guilds. Nearby adventurers seemed frightened by Kenta's beasts. Hector stepped forward to reassure them, saying everything was fine and that Kenti's creatures were loyal to him, so everyone should relax. While the crowd reacted in fear, one man called it ridiculous, and another displayed a small beast on his shoulder, saying it was the biggest creature he could handle. Ken calmed them, swore the beasts were his, and told them to put away their weapons. Hector stepped forward and told them not to worry. Hector urged Ken to hurry, and they kept going. At the reception desk, Ken told the woman he wanted to register as an adventurer. The receptionist was surprised to find him genuinely interested in joining their guild. She thanked him and gave him a form to fill out. When Kenta started filling out the form, the receptionist asked if he was Hector's friend, and Hector confirmed. He thought it was a bit reckless to let Kenta roam the streets alone, but was glad Kenta had made the right choice. The receptionist thanked Hector. She remarked that she could not believe any tamer could bond with such massive beasts, calling Kenta a beast master. Curious, Kenta asked what the difference was between a tamer and a beast master. Shaml explained that beginners were usually called beast masters, while those who could carve the tamer emblem were considered more advanced, and he added that Kenta had already gone beyond being just a tamer. Filling out the form, Ken felt the gods were not watching over him after all, but he realized he could read and write the language without difficulty, which felt like a small victory. After completing the form, Kenta handed it to the receptionist and asked if everything was in order. She reviewed it and found the mention of shadow/intriguing. She told him the registration fee was 1 silver coin, and asked him to lay his palm on the magic circle on the desk. Once Kent had done so, she wrapped his hand in a cloth. Light began to shine from underneath. From the magic circle, a card appeared. She handed Kenta his registration card, and he was amazed. Curious, he examined the card. He muttered to himself about how it all worked. Cutting him off, she teased that he shouldn't joke about it, especially not with 2 monstrous beasts at his side. Kenta asked where he could stay with his giant beasts, and the receptionist said no inn could accommodate them, but they could stay in the guild's lodging. Kento looked shocked and asked if the place was suitable. The receptionist said the guild lodging wasn't luxurious but did have a garden, a bed, and a water source, and that meals were not included. Sighing, he accepted the arrangement. They said it would be fine, and the receptionist asked for 1 silver coin for the night and another for the large beasts. Kent decided to pay for 10 days since he planned to explore, and the receptionist agreed to accommodate him for that time. After the transaction, Kenta walked over to Hector, asked if he was done, thanked him, and offered to take him to dinner as a token of appreciation. Hector said that once Kent dropped off his bags, he'd take him to join the others. Kenta stepped into the room and was surprised by how special it was. Much better than he had imagined. A man told him the room used to be reserved for many beast tamers and was always full, but now fewer were staying. Handing Kent the room key, he explained the water areas inside were separated and Kent could explore them freely. Entering the pond, Ken discovers a kitchen and a water point. But it seemed a bit strange. Samuel said the top section of the water area was for drinking and the bottom part was for washing. He told Ken not to wash anything dirty in the upper section. Shaml wrapped up his explanation, saying he might pop in and out but would always be there for Kenta when needed. Kenta thanked him and said he would count on him in a pinch. He left to grab dinner. Later, Nini arrived and told Kenta she would hold down the fort. She then lay down on the bed. Kenta found her irresistibly cute. Hugging her, he said that even though she had grown, she hadn't changed at all. Later, Kenta met Hector, who said the number of adventurers had dwindled. A member of Hector's party suggested that Kentashit use the outdoor standing area, and Kenta thanked them for the offer. A woman with a beer came over and asked if the huge creatures were part of his family, and Kenta nodded, promising to keep them well behaved so she did not need to worry. Smiling, she said Max was especially friendly and found it incredible. Hector led Kenta to the dining area, where a buffet offered plenty of food and drink, and Kenta noticed it was self-serve. With a cheer, Hector raised his beer and introduced himself as a swordsman. A young boy called himself Lime, the spearmaster, while an older man greeted Kenta as Balloon, the axe wielder. France introduced herself as the sorcerer, and Kenta, amazed by the variety of skilled people around him, thought about whether he could learn magic too. When everyone began eating, Kent has found the food incredibly delicious. Even in this new world, he was impressed by how enjoyable it was and how familiar the culture felt. The meat had a hint of herbs, and he wondered what kind but did not ask. The soup had a lovely, complete flavor, and the butter tasted comforting and familiar. The rest were having drinks. He urgently told Kenta to drink more. He felt they were not finished with their meal yet. Hector said that as adventurers, they had few restrictions and could take any quest they wanted at their own risk. Many requests called for gathering gems and materials and for slaying monsters. Hector advised Kenta to start with simple requests to get a feel for it. He reminded Kenta that any large familiar like Max needed to wear a collar, and Kenta said he already had a ribbon for Max. Hector nodded, saying it was a good temporary solution, but advising Kenta to get a proper collar next time, and Kenta agreed. Max said the alcohol smell was getting strong. Kent returned to the bartender and asked the price for 5, and the bartender said the total would be 1 gold coin. Kent stood up to leave, and Hector asked if he was leaving already. Smiling, Kenta told him to relax and do as he pleased and said he'd catch up with them later. Hector and the others kept celebrating as Kenta headed back to the room. When Kenta came back, Nini welcomed him and he sat down beside the bed. The following morning, Shaml woke him and told him it was already morning. He said he shouldn't crash like he was camping out, and Kenta groggily added that his body felt sore and stiff. Feeling down, he asked Sakura for help. After she did it, he felt surprisingly refreshed. Ken headed to the kitchen to make coffee. After a sip, he said it tasted wonderful. He asked if there was any coffee in this world. Shaml replied that many interesting things were happening there, and coffee was not uncommon. Kent said he'd heard from Hector and the others about a morning market in the square and planned to check it out, asking if everyone was coming along. Nini sat on the bed and looked quieter than usual. When Kent pointed it out, she denied being a recluse. He urged her to join them, saying it would help the townsfolk get used to their harmlessness. When they arrive at the market, Kenta was amazed by the wide range of goods available. He noted they had a mountain of stuff here, and it was time to gather some ingredients. He tasted a fruit and found it very sweet. After buying some ingredients, he asked the vendor how to eat them. The vendor said that whether grilled or boiled it is delightful, and even raw it tastes sensational. He then found a hamburger, and after one bite the spices were excellent and the flavor was delicious. Later he had some coffee. and was very happy to have found it all. He gathered a few familiar foods and said it was exactly what he'd expect from a nearby parallel world. He gathered many items to take with him and began storing them in Sakura. He put bananas, strawberries, cherries, potatoes, carrots, lettuce, spinach, coffee beans, and burgers into storage. Sako assured him she would take care of it. Next, he reached the section for butchers. I found the area quite cold. The seller reminded him after he bought several items to eat them all. She realized then that Kento was the renowned beastmaster everyone had been talking about. Kento grew a little flustered. The lady continued, saying her grandfather was a timber trader and that slimes used to bounce around their house back then, and Kenta showed her his slime, which she said was her first time seeing such a creature. When she touched it, she found it was not only very smart but also smooth, shiny, and adorable. Kent had explained where he got it. As he prepared to leave, the woman thanked him and asked him to come back soon. With the pantry overflowing, Kenton knew he had plenty. That night he decided it was the perfect time for a steak. He thought about going on a food hunt, maybe gathering a few gems along the way. Nini agreed. Soon they enter the forest, and Sham will lead them to the brownhorn rabbit's den. Kenta asked if Samuel Fa could handle it. Max, also heading out on a hunt, wished Kenta luck and asked Nini to do the same. Kenta wondered if the ravis would taste good to eat. Shamo said he was a gem monster, so they might not taste the same. Where Kenta hunted was full of holes in the ground, and Shamble explained it was a burrow. Kenta immediately asked Nini to shrink down, while Shamuel continued to explain to him that beasts and monsters were completely different. Originally, beasts were creatures of the world transformed by leyline influences that allowed them to grow, but kept them from getting larger than a certain limit. Originally, gem monsters were gems and could change their size at will. The gem they came from determined what kind of creature they could become. Kenta nodded and asked if they should wait for the rabbit to come out. Shamel suggested they let him change inside the hole. If he dove in, the rabbit would probably pop out. Kent agreed with the plan. Once Sham enters the hole, outside they waited. Soon a gentle rabbit appeared, and Kenta was amazed. I wondered how it managed to ignore the size of the hole. Shame will explain it was a variant, suggest calling the others, and Ken will reply that he isn't even used to fighting yet. The serpent then grew larger to capture the large rabbit. Meanwhile, all of Kent's other familiars began attacking the other rabbits. Kenta was satisfied with the results. I even found a few gems along the way. When they finished, Max arrived, and Serpan noted that most things were already taken care of. When Nini left to hunt, Kenta suggested that everyone else head out too. Shamble told him it would take a while for the rabbits to hatch, so he stopped there, and a small rabbit emerged from the hole. Kenta wondered if it was still the same one. Shamble confirmed it was freshly hatched. Seeing the rabbit was scared, Kenton apologized to it. He asked if it would like to join his party. He called it Lapen and greeted it warmly. Shamgal said the variant would grow stronger over time. Kenta rubbed his cheeks on the rabbit's soft fur and admired how fluffy and cute it was. Lying down, he wondered when they'd head back. Shamuel said they had until sunset, so there was no rush. Kenta thought about how it had been his first time fighting with a sword. Shama replied that he had gained muscle and was now average in strength, but his stamina was still lacking. Shamil reassured him that it was all part of the training and encouraged him to keep going, adding that Kenta had done exceptionally well for his first time. When Shamilsam introduced Kenta to such a wonderful world, he said he hoped Kenta would enjoy himself and live a long, happy life. Kenta couldn't tell whether Samuel was a good guy or a bad guy. Samuel told him he was a good person. By evening, they returned to the town entrance. A guard said Kenta had joined the rest of the guild. Kent said he would rely on the guards for a while, and they seemed pleased. Kenta and his familiars entered the town, and the townspeople were amazed to see them, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the distant screams were fading away. Ken then met the receptionist, who asked if he had come to sell gems, and he replied that he had a lot to sell. A nearby man said Kenta was ready to unload a massive haul of gems and urged him to show them. Kenta displayed the gems. Onlookers were shocked by how many there were. Kent sat down, and an old man came to help the woman sort the gems. The old man then said it was time to discuss the unit price and the breakdown of the gems. Kenta was shocked to hear the total was more than 50 gold coins. The old man said gems were always in short supply and would now rely on Kenta to provide them. He told Kenta to let him know if he ran into any trouble. Kenta asked if he could buy a map, and the woman said the guild sold them, but the old man kindly offered him one for free. Ken thanked him and opened the map. He said he'd check it later. Kenta stepped out with his familiars, and Sham said he would be thrilled if Kenta could blend into the world quickly. Kenta declined the suggestion. When they reached their room, Kenton headed straight to the kitchen to make something. He took out a piece of beef the shopkeeper called beefy and decided to follow the clerk's advice. He gave the meat a gentle tap to tenderize it and loosen the fibers, and since he had no pepper, he used more salt instead. Next, finding something that smelled like a potato, he assumed it was one and began to peel and boil it. Tasting a small piece, he confirmed it was a potato. After draining the water, he salted the potatoes until they were fluffy. Then he seared the meat on both sides until it was perfectly cooked. It fills the room with a pleasant scent. After they took a bite, Kenta found it delicious and the thick cuts were perfectly tender. This was the ultimate steak, tasting just like beef. Max asked if that was not already part of the world. Once they finished eating, everyone went to sleep. A rabbit tried to wake Kenta up. At first Kenta didn't realize it was a rabbit and mentioned Shenmue, telling it not to wake him. Seeing it was the rabbit, he stood up. Kenta left the room with his familiars for coffee, and after finding it delicious, he decided it was time to look through the trinkets and knickknacks. Kenta entered the shop looking for something, but he couldn't find it. When the shopkeeper came out, he asked what Kenta wanted and looked surprised to see Kenta's familiars. Kenta asked if the man had folding tables and chairs. The man confirmed they were inside and said the beasts could not enter. Ken is to ask them to wait outside. As they headed inside, the man commented on Kenta's fancy familiars, and Kenta said they were cute. The man showed Kent the tables and chairs, then asked if Kent had a plan to use the outdoors. He suggested carrying them would be easier if they were packed as cards. Kenta considered using a storage slime, and Shaml noted it was quite rare. Please mention that it is fine, and he will take one table. The man then showed the chairs to Ken and asked him to buy the smaller one. He then had the slime carry all his things. Next, Kenta entered another shop stocked with various armors and items. He asked whether Nini wanted a collar, and she said she would love something new. At that moment, the shopkeeper stepped outside with a worried look, thinking a beast might be lurking in the streets. Kenta said the beasts were his familiars and apologized. The man then realized Kenta was the town's revered beast master. Someone said it made him a bit scared, and Ken added that he was looking for a collar for Nini, but the collars in the shop were too small. The man asked to touch the beasts so he could take their size and create something truly amazing. Kent agreed, saying it would act like a perfect angel. Using a desk, the man measured Nini's collar size. A serpent suddenly emerged from Nini's fur. That shocked the man. He said he couldn't handle the snake. Kenta chuckled and said he'd forgotten the serpent that always hid in Nini's collar, but it was a sweet little thing. The man asked if that was true. He had never seen a creature like that before, and found Serpan surprisingly slender for its appearance. He asked Kenta to choose a color for the collar, saying it would blend beautifully over time. Nini chose a color and told Kenta, who said the crimson was perfect. He picked 2 more colors, and the man seemed pleased. Kenta asked for a basket or bag on Max's collar, so the pan would not fall off, and asked the man to make shoulder pads to help Falco Vistop. Measuring Max's collar size, the man said he could make any shape Kenta wanted. Kenta thanked him, said it would help a lot, and added that the man seemed able to do anything. The man said he came from the workshop city of Basin, which explained his confidence in his skills. Kenta wondered whether Basin was an actual city. The man suggested leather for the shoulder guard, promised it would be a masterpiece, and offered to make extra parts to build a perch. He gave 1 gold coin as an advance, and said he would pay the rest after the work was finished. Before they left, the man asked them to return in 3 days to pick up the items. Ken thanked him again, and they left. After that, he bought many different things and said it was a bountiful harvest. They would simply need to hunt for gems again to cover the extra expenses. As they went on, Kenta spotted something and wondered if it was cheese. Approaching the stall, he saw milk and asked the woman if people drank it. The woman agreed, saying that if it was the first thing in the morning, they could even have fresh cheese. Kent bought a few, promised he would come back, and he remarked that it was one of Kent's best traits. Some time later, Kenta was writing to Max. They all headed toward their destination, as Ken recalled the events from 3 hours earlier. When Shaml suggested we hunt the brown hard rock next, it would take a lot of effort, but we could sell it for a higher price. When Ken checked the map, he noted the name was funny and decided it was time to take a closer look. Finding Restam's location, he began to understand the world's layout. Shaml noted the map was rough. Kent told him not to criticize it because it was the map approved by the guild. Shamgal asked if that was the best precision the Adventurers Guild could offer. Kenta couldn't see why they hadn't just filled in the details themselves. Shamgal assured him it was fine, added there was a bonus, and asked Kenta to close his eyes. Can be complied with. After a moment, he opened his eyes. He noticed the map was much more detailed now. Shane explains that with the appraisal eye skill he can see the enhanced map, and Ken thanks him, calling it a lifesaver. Ken then studied the map, noting that to the west lay the ocean, the island nations, and basin, the dwarves' workshop city. The breeding grounds were on the brown, hard rock. As they near their destination, Kent said it looked like a wasteland, maybe volcanic, and you thought about the gem monsters. As he thought about it, the ground under him started to shake. Looking around, he saw many hard brown rocks scattered everywhere. Shami summoned the hammer and handed it to Kenta, telling him to smash the rocks with it. Ken found the hammer incredibly heavy. Shaml explained that after smashing the rocks they would peel, allowing Kenta to attack them. Kenta only needed to follow the process and finally swam the hammer. He grumbled that it was hard to manage as he struck the rocks. Small monsters started to appear. Max and Ninny handled them quickly. Kenton saw the gems set in the rocks were unusually large. He kept striking while his familiars finished off the monsters. Eventually, Kenta struck an especially hard rock, making his hands throb with pain. He asked Shaml whether there was a way to identify it, and Shaml replied that he wondered if Kenta could see it himself. That let Kenta unlock more of his appraisal eye skill. It let Kent see the gem monsters more clearly. Shaml explained that the gate skill Kent had gave him the power to see what they desired. Kenta kept smashing the rocks. Meanwhile, his familiars continued taking down the monsters. After a while, Ken admitted he was exhausted and suggested they take a break, saying he couldn't continue much longer, especially since the monsters are multiplying so fast. His hands were numb, and it was unclear if the town would ever feel the effects of the growing horde. Shame remarked that humans were quite fragile, and someone replied half-joking that he couldn't even hold a spoon at that moment. Shenmue suggested they gather some orange gloss moss from the valley to make an elixir. Ken asked why Shenmue did not gather it himself. Shenmue said he did not need to. Kent got up and Max said he would walk steadily. I can't lie on my back. It felt surprisingly comfortable and bouncy. Soon he fell asleep. After a while, Shaml slackened to wake him. Ken groggily opened his eyes. A deep trench lay in front of him. Shaml explained they switched to the Falco so they could dive into the canyon where the glowing orange moss thrived. Shocked by the idea, Kenta denied he really had to do it, but with the slime's help, he managed to make the claim to the Falco as it descended. He couldn't understand why they were unable to simply pick up the moss for him. The group moved deeper into the canyon. Kenta was Jocelyn when he fell to the ground. Shamel told him to make sure Kenta left the roots intact and only picked the leaves. The slimes would swallow the moss whole if the roots were killed. It took years to recover. Max and Ninny came down too, and Kenta was still shocked. He asked if they were okay with coming down, and they both agreed. Kenta started gathering the glowing orange moss, and Shameless held out a plate for him to put it on. Then Shenmue gave Aqua and Sakura the ability to mix and refine. Using the moss, they made an elixir. Then it was handed back to Kenta, and Shamel asked him to place his hand over the elixir. Ken felt the heel of his hand. The pain vanished. Filled with excitement, Kenta immediately began gathering more moss. He collected a large amount himself and asked Sakura to hold on to it for later. Looking back at the elixir he'd made earlier, he found it gone even though he hadn't used it. Shaml explained that the ointment wears off quickly, so he suggested Ken make it only when needed. That way it would last longer, and it was strongly recommended for use as an ointment. Kenta wondered if it was as safe as wax or petrol in jelly, then looked up and said they should head back soon. Shamo agreed and said it was almost closing time, so they should leave now. Kenta pointed out that rain on the valley floor could be a problem. Shamel reassured him it would be fine because it wouldn't rain there. They rarely visited the area. He said their legs would be more useful at night. Kenta agreed. He asked Sakura to set up the chair and table they'd bought the day before. After that, one cannot sadden the chair by saying it looked good. He realized that having a tent would make it perfect. Taking out the meat and sausages, he noticed they had been jostled a lot that day. While eating, he said the food was delicious and mentioned he would like some baguette too. He suggested coffee would be nice, but tea would be even better and some pepper too. They had used pepper at the food stalls, so it should be available there. When he finished his meal, Ken lay down between Ninny and Max and felt how soft and fluffy it was. Grateful for their company, he suggested they rest. The next morning, Kent told Max to go hunting while he gathered more glowing moss, and Max agreed eagerly. They rushed off so quickly that Kenta was left stunned. At that moment, Ninny called to Kenta and said there was something exciting. Kenta wondered what it was. Shaml mentioned a nearby highland chicken territory famous for its delicious meat and suggested Kenta could hunt one. The guild would handle the rest, and he mentioned the feathers were valuable materials, which Ninny also seemed to like. However, Kent refused, saying the hunt was theirs and he would not interfere. At that moment, Max arrived, proudly announcing he had caught a highland chicken and asking Aqua if he could borrow it. He set the chicken down. Kent said how huge it was and thanked Max for the catch. Soon Ninny returned with another chicken. Kenta was amazed and said they'd done quite well. He said he'd gathered a lot of glowing moss, so it was time to head back. Kenta climbed onto Falco to take off, and she told him to leave the flying to her. He was experiencing something incredible. Leaving the area, he rode Falco, marveling at how beautiful the world looked from above, then said, "Let's head back to the rest of him." A boy walked toward the town, excited to see Max and Ninny. Ran up to hug Ninny. The boy's mother was startled by this, who hurried over and asked what he was doing. She apologized to Kenta, joking that if the beasts wanted to eat, they should spare the boy and eat her instead. Kenta calmly explained that they were his familiars and would not attack humans, and the woman was taken aback. Her son started playing with Ninny, amazed by how soft and fluffy the fur felt. Curious, the woman asked Kenta if she could touch them too. Kenta nodded. She reached out gently to stroke Ninny's fur. Ken felt relieved knowing some people weren't afraid to interact with his familiars. When the woman and her son left, the town guards greeted Kenta. One said they hadn't seen him in a while and asked if he'd been to a distant town. Kenta said he'd been hunting and camping in the wilderness. Curious guards asked to touch Kentas's familiars, and Kent agreed. They happily petted Ninny and Max. After selling a few highland chickens, Kenta spoke with an old man who had overheard the deal, and when the man asked about the guild, Kenta said he had heard they could handle the sale. He also asked whether they would buy half the chickens, and the man agreed. Ken then suggested trading some brown hard rock gems. The old man was surprised. The account said these gems were highly valued for street lamps. They were not very bright, but they lasted a long time and made excellent fuel. After years of scarcity, the gents were highly valued and welcomed in every town, starting with the capital Inberg. The old man said the gems would brighten the town, and they agreed to settle the meat and gem trade details the next day. Walking with his familiars that night, Kenta reflected on the cycle of mana, how mana creates gems, gems give rise to monsters, gems later become fuel and monster bodies become materials, all of which eventually return to mana, and he found comfort in the thought, feeling a deep connection to the world's natural rhythms. Walking in the moonlight, he found peace in the quiet. We can stop at a cream cheese shop. He bought 10 of each variety. The shopkeeper thanked him for his purchase. Afterward, he picked up freshly baked bread, black pepper, and a mill, glad to finally find a good one, and bought some spices, pens, and ink. He also bought a new tent for his upcoming camping trips. Kent planned to visit a different town soon and decided to keep collecting gems until then. Being able to keep giving back to the townspeople along the way made him content. The next day, Shaml told Kenta about a good spot nearby and asked if he wanted to hunt pill bugs or gold butterflies. They headed to the location. There they faced and defeated many giant pill bugs. Huge frogs. They quickly realized the giant caterpillars were far worse than the snakes they had fought before, much more dangerous and harder to handle. Facing those challenges, Kenta urged his familiars to stay strong and keep fighting. Soon they saw a giant butterfly. Shannon will say that sometimes you have to work hard to seize the opportunity. Since the gold butterflies didn't attack, Kenta had to decide what to do as they descended toward the flowers. He added that the butterflies' wings sold for high prices and advised Kenta to go for their bodies instead. Kenta wondered if those bodies could be used for materials. Shamgal said the adult butterflies' hardened wings were processed using Dorgan techniques and turned into clear, beautiful glass. Kenta was surprised to learn the wings could turn into glass. At that moment, Falco rushed in and attacked the giant butterfly. The butterfly approached Kenta. He quickly slashed his sword through the creature's body. A rush of satisfaction came with the clean stride. However, the giant wings fell on him, and he called out to Ninny for help. He half-joked that he felt like a goner. After Nini helped him, Kenta wondered if the wings would really turn to glass as Shaml had said, and Sakura, ever efficient, put the wings into her inventory. While they caught their breath, a sudden noise put Kenti's familiars on alert. Shaml signaled for Kenta to step back, his expression serious. Kenta was unsure if they needed anything. He was about to ask when he noticed a large joint beetle approaching. Shaml told him to hang back and let the familiars handle it. Kenti's familiars quickly protested, saying it was unfair for him to sit back while they fought. At that moment, Falco, confident as always, darted toward the beetle, claimed it as her prey and quickly grabbed it, lifting it into the air. The others watched with envy and muttered that it wasn't fair. Then Falco threw the beetle to the ground. We landed with a thud. It was instantly impaled on its own horn. They were surprised when the beetle turned into a large gem. The horns were much bigger than any they had seen before, and Shaml said he was lucky because they were valuable. When it transformed into a weapon, it could be used as one and looked beautiful and metallic. Shaml explained that hardened wings are rare, but strong gem monsters sometimes drop materials that can be used to forge a powerful sword. If Ken suggests he might have a sword made from those materials, Shaml will recommend finding a skilled weaponsmith, such as one in Bison. Kenta agreed, saying it sounded like a good plan, so they decided to head for Basan next. That evening, they took the gems to the guild. Both men were stunned and excited to see so many. The old man said the brown rock frog lights lasted a long time and that they had earned 20 gold coins in the previous day's meet, plus 10 gold coins for that day's haul. Kenton said it was quite a sum. The old man noted that Kenta had been a great help and had even earned the gold butterfly wings. Kenta said Restam had helped him too, so he was glad to return the favor. Then the man brought 50 kilos of chicken and asked Kenta to take it back with him. Kent restored it using Sapkura. Walking down the street afterward, Kenton noticed the street lamps were much brighter. Shaml explained that more lamps had been lit. Neighbors were delighted by the brighter light and said they had lived in the dark for so long. They also said the monsters seemed to be increasing, and people were talking about resuming the hunt soon. Ken returned to his room and said he had picked up Highland chickens, bread, butter, and flour for dinner. He planned to flatten the chicken, season it with spices, crust it in breadcrumbs, and toast the bread in a pan. Use a flour and a beaten egg. Before pan-frying it slowly in butter. Carefully preparing the Highland chicken, he made juicy cutlets. After getting a bite, Kento was delighted by how delicious it was, the perfect balance of butter and red crumbs. And the plump, juicy chicken. By adding the bread and cheese, he turned the cutlet into a sandwich. Taking a bite, he felt a surge of excitement, noting that he was growing richer in this world, both in flavor and in experience. Later, Kenta went for a walk and stopped at a shop to get a drink, picked up many items but couldn't find any tea leaves, and then noticed a sweet shop nearby and decided to check it out. Inside, a sign advertised a new cookie bread that was sweet and delicious. He bought one to try, and it turned out as he suspected. It was melon bread. Just as he was about to leave, a familiar voice made him turn to see Nini. She hugged him and couldn't believe the woman and child from earlier, who had first befriended him, were there, and it turned out the woman had opened the shop. Kenta asked if she was selling anything, and she explained business had been slow that day because the location wasn't ideal and luck hadn't been on their side. Kenta said he wanted to buy all the stock, noting the vegetables looked fresh and the trinkets were useful. The woman said that was fine. Kenta explained she was the first person who wasn't afraid of his familiars, so he wanted to help her. He insisted he would gladly buy everything from her. She agreed, told him the total would be 20 silver coins, and thanked him for his generosity. The woman and her son were thrilled because they had sold everything that day. The boy said he was hungry. The woman pointed out it was already past noon. He then asked Kenta if the food he was eating was tasty. Kent smiled, called it sweet and delicious, and offered the boy a bite. While eating, the boy said it was delicious. The woman thanked Kenta for sharing the treat with them. Did Ken go to the left afterward? They headed to a nearby shop to buy a collar. The shopkeeper held up the collar. Kent said it was very nice, and Nini, who was with him, seemed pleased too. The shopkeeper then put a rabbit collar on Max, and Kent pointed out that it came with a lid. The man then showed him a perch for Falco. Kent said everything looked great. The shopkeeper said the work had taken longer than expected, and he would need 4 extra gold coins. Ken thanked 10 for his effort. The man said the price wasn't the result of haggling. Kenta was still unsure and asked whether the extra charge was a ripoff. The man assured him it was not. Kenta said he would never accuse him of that and thanked him again for the excellent craftsmanship. The shopkeeper grew emotional and told Kenta that if he ever needed anything else, he could ask. Ken will ask about the saddle and whether it will fit on Max. The man replied that it could be secured with a bit and wondered if the belt would hold. When they put the saddle on Max, he hoped it would not be too restrictive. Kenta asked how it felt wrapped around him, and the man reassured him it was secure and that the reins would attach to the collar. After everything was fixed in place, Kenta said the fit was perfect. Max said it didn't feel heavy at all. The man said the size might need a small adjustment once it was completed. Ken said it looked really cool. Max confirmed there was no tightness, and Kenta called it amazing. Kenta went out to eat and drink some beer he found excellent. Hector and his friends arrived just then, and he said Kenta had become the talk of the town. He said there was a guild request Kenta might be interested in and asked if he wanted to hear about it. Hector explained that in the 3 villages around Restam, orchards were being damaged and hoof-like tracks had been found at the scenes. Kenta wondered if this might be the work of a hunting monster. Hector explained that the animals were not eating everything, only certain produce, and that humans were likely involved. He also suggested it could be the work of a tamer or a beast master. Hector told Kenta he could choose whether to take the job, but the village was poor so the reward would be modest, and if it became a confrontation with a beast master, the risk would be high and the pay might not be worth it. Ken asked why Hector had taken the job in the first place. Someone was in trouble, Hector said, and those jobs were often avoided. Hector added that he didn't mind the work himself. Kenta agreed with what he said. The elderly guild member saw Kenta and Hector off, telling them he was counting on them. He can't keep a thought to himself. This would be his first official guild request, and he wondered what they would encounter on the job. Hector noticed the new saddle on Kenti's familiar and said it didn't seem to mind. Kenta said he had asked at the leather workshop on Craftsman Street. Hector was shocked and said the man there was known to be moody and was surprised Kenta had even approached him. Kenta added the old man had seemed friendly. Hector said the old man was a skilled craftsman, but he had a reputation for refusing new orders while selling off his remaining stock, and people said he would retire soon. Kenta may have made the right decision. I can recall the old man's words. At last they arrived at History Village. Village Chief Brian welcomed them and thanked them for coming. Kent introduced his familiars, and then Brian led them to the site. Explained that the creatures had been taking the best crops right before harvest. It was likely the work of someone who knew horses. Kent examined the footprints and thought they looked like a horse's, but he was puzzled that they were so different from human tracks and from a wild horse's. Shaml senses something strange. At first he suggested a centaur might have done it, then quickly dismissed the idea. Hector went up to Kenta and asked whether he meant a centaur could be responsible. Kenta said that was possible. He believed human-horse hybrids might exist, and Sham agreed, adding that they usually lived on remote mountaintops and rarely came down to the land below. Kent asked Hector whether the creature they were talking about was really a centaur and wondered what would happen next. Hector said it was a mythical creature from the phantom race that no one had ever seen and suggested that catching it and bringing it to the capital would be a major event, so Kent considered hunting it down. France said Kenta must be joking, arguing no human could fight a centaur and that even the king's elite squad would be overpowered by the centaur's strength. Everyone felt something strange in the distance. Sham asked if everyone could sense it, and Kent agreed. He began to get an idea of what it might be. Sham told Kenta to clear the area. Kenta asked the others to leave him alone for a while. Hector said Kent's decision seemed like something someone from the forest would do. Friends, seeing they were in Kenti's hands, he would take it to him and return to the village. Ken asked them to tell the villagers to stay inside and assured them he would return once it was safe. After the area was cleared, Kenta called to the centaur and told it to reveal itself. When the centaur didn't show up, Kenta wondered if it had not understood. Then Sham will also release the first stage's second-year recognition and its second mouth language. Instructed to try speaking, Kenta called out to the centaur again, assuring it he had not been harmed. The centaur revealed itself and asked how he knew that. Kenta felt excited when he saw the centaur in his car. Someone asked why it was so far from its homeland. Noticing this, the centaur started crying and stumbling. Someone turned to Kenta and scolded him for making the centaur cry. Kenta, confused, asked what he had done wrong, then apologized to the centaur and asked if it wants anything to eat. The centaur is shut like a mouth. When Kenta offered something to eat, the centaur asked if it was fruit, and he wasn't entirely sure. The centaur ate the fruit. Thanking Kenta, Bari Henel, curious, introduced himself as the youngest of the Chiron and asked who Kenta was. From his concealment, the centaur said Kenta did not seem like an ordinary person. Kenta suspected the cause was magic. Shaml told the centaur that the centaur could now see him clearly. Shocked to see Samuel, the creator god of their world, the centaur asked why he was there and why he looked so cute. Shaml asked what had happened to the centaur. The centaur said that as Earth's power waned, their people began to decline. Some had begun to shrink and could not move, just like him. Shaml asked whether anyone had disappeared. Shaking his head, the centaur said it was only a matter of time because he was unusually large and had left his village to reduce the number of mouths to feed. Samuel explained the centaur was pushing himself too hard and they all needed the strongest mana to survive. The centaur said that during his journey humans found him and locked him in a cage to take him to the royal capital, but he escaped when he saw a chance. He drained a massive amount of mana and barely reached the village, on the brink of death. Kenta understood and said this was why the centaur looked the way he did, and the centaur agreed, thanking Kenta for the fruit that restored his health and helped him survive. Kenta said out loud that the centaur's form seemed odd. The centaur said he was more than 300 years old. Shaml explained that when people were at their lowest, centaurs burned their own mana to survive. If nothing was done, they would shrink and eventually vanish. Kenta was stunned by the revelation. He voiced concern about the centaur's recovery, and the centaur said that with enough mana, he would return to his normal state. Shane added they might need more mana for at least a day's recovery, and the more mana the centaur had, the faster he would heal. Kenta asked Sakura to show how much fruit they had. Sakura opened his storage and displayed the fruit. Kenta ordered the centaur to eat it all. As the centaur ate, he asked Kenta how Kenta had ended up with Samuel. Shaml presented Kenta as the world's savior. The centaur was stunned to hear that. Shaml explained that Kenta came from another world and that Sham reincarnated him into this world. Bowing, the centaur said that without Kenta, he would have disappeared and thanked Kenta for saving their world. Kenta replied that he hadn't done anything. All Shaml had asked was that he help the centaur return home. Kenta agreed and said to Nini. It felt like a long journey, but the centaur reassured him not to worry. Kenta asked if his hunger was satisfied, and the centaur thanked him and said it was. Kenta then asked if the centaur knew where his home was, and the centaur said he did. Thinking about how earnest, serious, and lovable Kenta seemed, Kent explained he owed Samuel a favor and was already on his way. When the centaur asked if that was all right, Kenta shook his hand and learned his name was Bari. Later, when Ken returned to the village, Brian asked how everything had gone and if Ken was all right, and Ken replied that they had made it back safely. Brian then asked if the creature was really a centaur. Ken denied it and said it was another kind of beast, but that they had worked things out. Kenta then asked if Brian could cover the damages and pay for the remaining fruit trees, and if 50 gold coins would be enough. Ryan said it should be enough to cover the costs, so they should ship whatever they could to rest them. Brian suggested that everyone stay the night so they could prepare for the harvest and shipment the next day. Ken asked Hector if everything was all right. Hector said he would report to the guild the next day. Kenta asked Brian where to buy the tea, and Brian replied that the leaves came from Leaworth village, one of the villages involved. He agreed to take Ken there. While Ken set up the tent outside, Hector apologized for taking the guest room, and Ken said he preferred to be with them and that the tent was cozy too. Hector said the storage was amazing and that he wanted one himself. Kent said it made traveling much more comfortable. An image of apple juice and bread with jam was hidden in the text, and they shared it. France told Kenta they had to report to the guild. Kenta agreed. When he told them everything, France and Hector were shocked. Kenta asked whether they should report it to the guild. Fran said it was a tricky situation, but given the circumstances, they'd keep it confidential. It would be better to tell the guild everything. The whole situation had been hard for them. The next day, when they reached the rest of the Adventure Guild, everything was reported to the guild, and the members were stunned. Kenta then asked Bari to step outside. Bari then appeared. Seeing a real centaur overwhelmed the men, and one said he never thought he would live to see one. An elderly man shook Kento's hand and thanked him. Bari thought the trip had been worth it, judging by how happy the man was. The other two approached Bari, curious and eager to shake his hand. He encouraged them to ask anything they wanted. One of the women then asked for his signature. Kent told them that the village chief, Brian, was waiting, so he would step out briefly and ask them to keep an eye on Bari. Hector walked over to Brian and suggested they head to Leaworth Village, then said they would be leaving soon and told Kenta to call them if anything came up. Kenta was with Max when Brian asked where Nini was, and he replied that she had gone out hunting and would be back soon. Brian said Kent's familiars were impressive and asked where Kent had met them. Kent said he had met them on Shadow Cut Mountain. Surprised, Ryan said Kenta was the first person he knew from that place and asked what it was like. Ken replied that there was not much to say about it. After that, Brian apologized. They said they had now reached Leaworth Village. At the supply shop, a woman thanked Kenta for protecting the orchard and said they had excellent green and black tea, inviting him to choose his favorite. Kent said he'd already received his reward, so he would buy plenty. The woman thanked him for his purchase. And note that the third village, Hubble. Tenny had a fine selection of wood carvings, baskets, and dishes. Kenta felt the chief was teasing him, but then said he would look and buy everything. Kenta and Brian arrived in Albel Village and looked at the various items. Kenta said he had seen some before and had bought them from that family. Then a man asked if Kenta was the one who had bought a lot from the Lorry family. They thanked him for supporting them so well. Nay was with Kenta at that moment, while Max was out hunting. A cat suddenly appeared and stared at Nini, and commenting on how huge she looked while wondering what they were. Kenta froze when he heard the cat speak like a human. The cat greeted them with a hello. The man fired a shot to drive it away, saying there was no food for it. Kenta wasn't sure the cat had actually spoken. He kept buying a few things while the cat was leaving. Shaml will note that the situation seems odd. Kenta agreed, noting the cat didn't look normal, and Shameless said it didn't belong there. Kenta called to the cat and asked if it could speak. The cat said she did not understand what he was saying. Kenta thought it might be his imagination, and the cat confirmed it was only that. Kent insisted it was talking. Curious, the cat asked whether he could understand her. Shaml realized the creature was a Cat Sith, a mythical beast. Kenta was stunned and asked if it was like a centaur. Shaml confirmed, explaining that mythical beasts rarely showed up in human towns and that something seemed to be changing. Kenta asked if the cat lived in the village, but the cat denied it, so he then asked if it was getting enough food. The cat said she sometimes did, but the village was poor, so she would not force anyone to feed her. Shaml, voice thick with feeling, called out to Kenta. He knew Shaml wanted him to take care of the cat. Ken would reply that he wouldn't say no, so he would help. Turning to the cat, he asked if she wanted to join them, at least for a meal. Talon introduced herself and greeted them warmly. When Max returned from his hunting trip, Talon was shocked to see him, and Ken remarked that their group was growing. Shaml believed Kentis's presence steadied the magic, but the sudden changes had a serious effect that needed close monitoring. They returned to Restam. A small child ran up to Nini and Max. Ken identified them as members of the Lorry family. He said he had just come from Albel Village on a guild request, and someone wondered whether it was related to the orchard issue and whether it had been resolved. Hearing Kent confirm, it made them happy. Ken noticed the boy eating bread and asked if he liked it. The boy said it was very sweet and tasty. It sells out quickly. As the child and his mother walked away, he couldn't stop thinking about how the new products were selling well and Nolan bread had become a hit. Later, Kentam prepared an egg sandwich. They were excited to find mayonnaise to add to it. Climbing the stairs to the building where he was staying, he heard the guild master call to him. Thank him for his work today. The guild master said the guild would buy fruit from the village to support Bari. The fruits were stored in the warehouse where Bari was waiting. Kenta went to see Bari. Noting how much she had grown, Bari said it was all thanks to Kenta. Ken asked Sakura to collect whatever they could. After opening the map and wondering where Bari's hometown was, Bari said it was deep in the mountains and had an easy-to-find entrance. Since there was no rush, he told Kenta to put his travels first, and now that he was out, he wanted to enjoy the journey too. Kenta considered going ahead with the original plan, and Sham will agree with that decision. Ken then said they would first go to Bayasan to get his sword made and afterward head to Bari's place. The road from the eastern capital to Bayasan looked shorter, but Shane warned the east was unsafe and suggested they take the west route instead, and Kenta agreed. They said they would pass through Chester, cross 2 rivers, then go through Lauwerf and Walsh before reaching Basin. He told Bari the trip would be long, but they should enjoy the towns along the way. Bari agreed. Kenta asked Talon what she usually ate, and she said she ate everything, including meat, fish, eggs, and vegetables. Kenta realized it was the same as a regular diet, so he gave her some chicken. Talon said it looked delicious. Bari wondered when the Cat Sith arrived, then greeted Talon. Ken finished his meal and reminded everyone to stock up before leaving Restam. Once he fell asleep, he thought about what kind of journey awaited them. The next morning, they all arrived at the brown, hard rock area. Kenta said it was in demand and suggested they hunt. Nini said she would do her best. Talon grew larger in agreement. Kenta was stunned to discover that Talon could change size. Shaml said mythical beasts could change size, and gem monsters had similar traits, but the beasts used a slightly different approach to the art, and Kenta wondered about the art and the magic. Asking if they called it that there, he was eager to try it himself. Shaml replied that Kenta wouldn't try the art just yet, and Kenta asked if Shaml had used it. Sham replies that he can use it wisely but warns not to overdo it, and an excited Kenta agrees. Sham and the rest of you showed him 3 cards and asked him to pick one. Once Kent selects a card, Shane instructed him to place both hands in front of him, palms out. Kent followed his instructions. Mo set his pawns over Kenti's and ordered him to gain ice affinity. Freeze on command, then take note. Shami was instructed to try it, and when he did, he spoke the words. A nice rock appeared in his hand. It felt intoxicating. Shamuel then asked him to say the word shatter. When his kin spoke the word, the rock turned into small pieces. Samuel told him to rescue Malt. The rock started to melt in Kenti's hands. About Kent, thanks to Samuel, Shame will explain that the ice was hard and that throwing it could cause damage. He demonstrated by saying rock ice and throwing the ice rock toward a nearby monster, where it caused damage on impact. Sham will ask him to handle the task with care. Ken suggested they start and try to catch a lot. He formed ice boulders and with his familiar's help, hunted monsters to gather gems. The familiars urged him to hurry because they were running late. Though he said his heart was tired, he pulled out his hammer again. They kept searching for gems. He also said he'd pick up potions that day, so they should go all out. After hunting for some time, they went to the shop of the man who made collars for his familiars. The moment the man saw him, he asked why he had come. Kent said he wanted a collar for the cat. Realizing Kenta had been hunting again and that adventurers would soon write to help, the man felt grateful for Kenta's efforts. Kenta asked Talon to choose the color she liked. He told the man he was going to Basin to forge a sword from a horn. Shocked to hear about the horn, the man asked Ken to show it. When Kent showed it, the man said it was a Hercules beetle horn. Ken should ask whether it was truly valuable. The man said he was from Basin and ran a well-regarded shop on Main Street. Misfortune piled up and he ended up buried in debt. A friend had given him the rare Hercules beetle horn. That night someone stole it. In the end, the man could not pay his debts and lost both his shop and his home. Stopping the theft could have kept him from losing everything, but he tried to pay off his debt by taking his friend's money. Feeling foolish for avoiding his friend, he knew that back in Bazin, his friend had already forgiven him. The man then thanked Kenta for the horn's piece. Have Ken reply and tell him to forget it. At last the man said he was Fort and that his friend was Fyanth. He wished Ken a safe journey. Kent said he was glad to have bonded with Fort, then shook his hand. Kenta left and Fort went back to work. Shaml reminded himself he was the creator god, charged with shaping, protecting, and nurturing the multiverse. His newly created world was rich in water and nature, with diverse life living together in harmony. It was a precious creation. The weakening late lines caused a collapse. All efforts to fix it failed. As a last resort, he had to summon a stable source from other worlds. Despite searching, he couldn't find anyone in time, and the collapse kept advancing as the clock ran out. At last, he summoned Kenta, who could save the world. Kent's arrival filled the air with a warm, comforting presence. Samuel was deeply indebted to Kenta and wanted to repay him. The next morning, Kenta's familiars woke him. He greeted each of them in turn. He noticed how much Bari had grown, and Bari thanked him for his care. After he washed his face, Ken should ask his familiars to do the same. They had a great time with it. Kenta then made breakfast. He said he'd fry the vegetables in some olive oil he found the other day. He prepared panko for tonkatsu. After tasting it, he was surprised at how delicious it was and wondered whether the variety was lighter than you had expected. He made fried chicken too, and it turned out just as well. Secure stored everything while it was still hot, so we can thank her for it. He asked Shaml if he wanted anything to eat. Shaml declined. Someone asked if they were not going to hunt that day, and Kent wondered what to do since he also had to prepare for the journey. Shaml explained that there were many new gem monsters to hunt, such as large brown rats and brown killer mantises. The brown grasshoppers were especially hard to manage. Kenta was curious about them and said they could swarm in large numbers. He decided they would hunt that day, prepare for the journey the next day, and leave the day after that. Bari said he would be at the guild. With his familiars ready, Kenta called out, "Let's go hunt." They arrived at their destination. Kent encountered a large number of mantises that looked very intimidating. Shambles said if they were only baiting with antics, Kenta could handle them, so they should hang back for now. They began fighting the mantises and Kent to see how many there were. A variant Nant suddenly disappeared behind him. Nini rushes to protect Kenta. He quickly swung his sword and cut it down. When he did that, he found a gem. It looked like a hardened material or a stiff substance, but it was undeniably beautiful. Max and Nini were stunned to see him defeat the monster so easily. Shimo noted how much Kenta had improved. Max and Nini admired him, impressed that he had taken down a variant on his own. Shane Mullen said this victory meant the brown grasshoppers would no longer be a problem, and urged them to let Esku go as they continued their journey. They kept going. Ken mentioned that Shaml would confirm the location of the grasshoppers, but it was getting late and you wondered if they were on the right path. Max agreed. At that moment, Shamwell appeared. They said there was an emergency, so they had to run faster. Max and Nini began running at once. Kenta was left wondering what had happened, and Sham will explain that a staggering number of monsters had appeared and the situation was dire. Kenta asked whether Shaml knew there would be a massive outbreak, and Shaml said the numbers had far exceeded expectations and the monsters would wipe out the plants and animals, causing significant harm to the people. Kenton needed to assess the situation, but Shaml insisted on handling it alone, so Kenton asked whether they could help in any way. Sham will say it was impossible. Kenta asked if there was anything else he could do to help. The shame would last if he could borrow Kent's body. He explained that using a medium makes it easier for him to fight. Kenta hesitated, unsure if Samuel could really enter his body. Recognizing the urgency, he let Shaml use it. Moved by Kent's willingness to help, Samuel became emotional and said Kent had never refused him anything. Kent smiled and said it was because he was a good guy. Shame promises he will make sure Kenta stays alive, then he steps away from Max and Nini. Telling them to stay here should be fine. He entered Kenta's body, and Kenta was surprised to feel his body moving on its own. Shamgal's voice echoed in his mind, and Kenta wondered if the grasshoppers were still a threat. Shamgal explained that the ley lines had stabilized, but their energy had exploded. When the grasshoppers swarmed, they mutated and became even more ferocious. The abundant water and plant life only made the situation worse. Shamel had planned to handle it sooner. The reproduction rate was so fast he never expected this to happen. Knowing it would be dangerous and terrifying for Kenta, he asked him to close his eyes. Kenta paused and asked if he should refrain from looking, and Sham will agree. Kent said he was trying to protect this place. He may be a coward at times, but he can be brave too, so let him share this burden. Shamel thanked him. Then he said, "Let's watch this together, and when it's over, don't be afraid of him." Ken was about to say it might be a bit late, but Shameless smiled and asked him to promise. Kent nodded in agreement. Add it to "let's celebrate when they get back." Shem nodded and said that because of his position, he had kept his distance, but he had thought for some time that the food looked delicious. Ken chuckled and said he would whip something up. "Let's clear this up quickly." A massive swarm of grasshoppers swept toward them, the insects huge and so numerous. Ken said they were huge and there were so many. Using his power, Shamble pushes them all back, his magic forming a barrier between them and the swarm. Kent and Marvel are at the site. They realized the swarm was even consuming the animals. Moving quickly, Shamble cuts through them with ease. His blade cut down the creatures as he fought. Shamalt said he wasn't finished yet. Flicking his wrist, he burned the remaining grasshoppers. Shanel's power stunned Kenta, but Shamel kept coming, launching a meteor attack to thin their ranks. Kent suggested that if they keep firing like this, it will be easier. Sham shook his head and said they can't just keep shooting them all. The land where the meteors fall will be destroyed. Regenerating will take a huge amount of time, so avoid it unless absolutely necessary. Instead, Sham keeps cutting through the swarm with his sword. Flames danced along the blade as it sliced through the air. Kenta was awestruck by the flames, but Sham will apologize, worried the sword might get damaged in the process. The aggressive Hopper lunges at the channel, striking his arm and causing him pain. Sham will immediately apologize for injuring Kent. He used his power to heal the wound. Watching the battle unfold, Kenta wondered if the grasshoppers were finally starting to thin out. Shaml glided through the air again. Scorching the remaining creatures with his flares, he slashed at them again. He fought without stopping, his clothes growing more tattered as the battle went on. After the long fight, Shaml collapsed to the ground from exhaustion. Kenta looks back, remembering the car crash that killed his parents when he was a teenager. Afterward, his uncle took him in, and Kenta used his inheritance to pay for tuition. After moving to the village, he found a job and eventually became self-sufficient. Each day he handled packed trains and worked tirelessly. His day began with meetings in the morning and client visits in the afternoon, then heading home to sleep. That night, Nini came to him as he lay in bed. The next morning, Kento woke and knew it was time to get up. No alarm sounded, so he slept a little longer. When he finally came to, suddenly he found himself badly injured and immediately realized it had all been a dream. At that moment, familiar voices called to him. Everyone was very happy that he had finally returned. When Kenta came to, he remembered fighting a swarm of locusts that had badly injured him. Shanival handed him a drink. It tasted sweet. Cannot drink at all. Soon he realized he could speak again, then thanked them for their help. Seeing that Max and Nini were both emotional, he apologized to them. Sham will encourage him to drink more so he can regain enough strength to move. Can thank them again. Samuel then approached Kenta. She gently told him he had been broken. Finally able to move his hand, Kenta touched Samuel and felt how soft his tail was. Samuel warned him that it was a sensitive spot and told him not to overdo it. Shaml then thanked Kenta sincerely for saving him twice. Kent replied modestly that he had only screamed. Shaml said it had been extremely loud. Kenta wondered how long he'd been lying there. Samuel said it had been about a day and a half. Kenta was shocked by the news. Shaml continued, saying he had stored the wasteland in a subspace and swapped it for a meadow. Kenta was astonished and wondered whether it could really be the same place because it looked so incredible. Shamgal assured him the wasteland would slowly recover. Kenta agreed and thanked Samuel for everything he had done, and Shame expressed relief that Kenta was safe. While Max and Nini licked him, Kent apologized for causing them worry and thanked them sincerely. He said they should return to let him rest because Bari and the guild were waiting for them. Samuel gave Ken new clothes and armor, along with his sword. Kent asked Sakura to help him wash up, then changed into the new clothes. Shamble said the armor felt sturdier. Kent noticed the clothes had changed a little. Now he could hold his sword with both hands. Carefully checking his sword, he saw it was still broken. Shame will explain that the locust gems were with them, along with many variants. Kenta asked how many they had. Shami will reveal that Aqua had 49 million, while Sakura had 57 million. About 1/10 of them are variants. Kenta was shocked and asked whether carrying so many gems would cause a mess. Shamu reassured him that the gems were safe. Explained that if monsters multiplied like locusts, they could become a serious problem. Kenta said holding them was fine for now and suggested stashing them away. Shamuel then asked whether Kenta planned to cash them in. Ken should reply that the guild would fall apart if they did. He said it was time to head back because he was starving. Calling out to Max and Nini, he asked if the food was ready. They apologized for forgetting, and Kent told them to go ahead and get the food. He'd wait for them. Meanwhile, his familiars want to prepare the food. Ken removed a table and a chair from Sakura, including a copy set, plus a sandwich on kettle bread. He started eating, beginning by saying it was so good. Shen will ask if it was really that good. Nodding, Kenton offered some to Shanmul. He said he would treat Shamel, who seemed to want some fried chicken. Kent joked that Samuel seemed to crave it. Shem, who plans to apologize to Kenta, said he never meant to misunderstand Kenta. He wanted Kenta to be happy. Kenta realized Shamu had been worried about those things. He said aloud that he used to dread schoolwork and that getting up in the morning felt like a chore. For now, he was having a great time. Kenton realized he had enjoyed his old life too, but he didn't want to go back to it. Shamel said the soul would want it if Kenta ever asked for it. Ken replied that his current life was wonderful. He was glad Samuel had brought him here, making the most of his second life, surrounded by his beloved pets. I made it and feel incredibly lucky. He then shared some of his food with Chingles. Shim will accept it with a thank you and take a bite. Ken will ask if that was good. Samuel nodded in agreement, confirming that it was. When you returned to the guild, Kenta approached the old man and asked how many gems they wanted. The old man said he would take as many as Kenta could bring. Kenta said the guild bankrupted Michael, and then asked if they would also buy the variants, and the old man confirmed they would. Kenta asked if 10 of the standard variants, along with the gems from the brown grasshopper, would be acceptable. After their discussion, the old man asked if any dangers remained and was told that, at the very least, they had wiped out the overpopulated grasshoppers. The old man warned it could become a war of attrition with heavy casualties. He said there had been many earthquakes everywhere, but fortunately there was no damage, and he was grateful and happy that Kenta was safe. The old man said he hoped to meet the other collaborators someday, because it seemed like an amazing experience. The old man asked how many gems Kenta had collected. Kenta said it was a secret. He couldn't help wondering whether they could really trust him so easily, and he felt like he was saying something strange. The old man assured him he had never lied. More importantly, he asked whether Kenta really intended to run that place. Kenta agreed and said his main goal was to travel the world. The old man thought about how his father had bound him to such a remote place, then asked if Kenta could request extra guild registration in any town they visited, and Kenta wondered what that would involve. The old man said the town on the maps had a guild, and he planned to register there as before, suggesting they combine the guilds so they could circulate gems but not requests, help the residents, and link his name and activities across the guilds for mutual support. Kenta saw many lodging discounts and decided to help both the town and the guild by using them. As Kent is led outside, grateful for his hard work, Bari said he would have joined Kenta sooner if he could, and Kenta apologized for keeping him waiting for days. Bari said he had stayed at the guild, where Sham would have reported to him first. Asked how things had gone, Shamuel replied cryptically that it was a secret. Kenta noted that the world was full of secrets. The next day, Kenta gathered extra provisions, including bread, butter, sugar, freshly brewed coffee, chicken and vegetable sandwiches, fruits for Barry and chicken for Talent, and after exchanging gems, he was all set to leave. An old man walked up to him, murmuring that it was time to say goodbye. He reached out his fist to Kenta, wishing him good luck and strong bonds. Kenta bumped it back. Kenta told Bari to take care as he left for Chester. Restam was full of kind people, and he had enjoyed his time there. Now he wondered what kind of town and people would be waiting for him. While traveling, a swarm of salamanders suddenly chased him. He wondered how he had gone from relaxing by the stream to being chased. Sham will explain that it was the massive breath of the dark brown giant salamanders. At that moment, Max arrived and asked Ken to get on him. Shaml told Kenta to strike the salamander's weak spot with ice while escaping. Kenta agreed. An elemental attack came from ahead. He couldn't counter it in time, and the attack was suddenly slashed away, becoming a large gem. A man asked Kenta if he was okay. Ken thanked him for his help. Shamuel recognized the man as Hasfer. Hasfer wondered aloud whether it really was Shamuel and what had caused him to assume such a cute form. Kenta wondered whether Hasfer knew Shamuel's, and Shamuel then introduced Kenta as that world's savior. She finally realized Kenta was from another world and thanked him. When Haster introduced himself in turn, Kenta couldn't help but think he was a god. Shameless suggested Hasfer might be the embodiment of a battle god, and Kent considered the possibility of a god taking human form. Shame will explain that when he made that world, his friends helped him, and Hasfer was one of the guardians. Kenta found that reassuring, then asked why they couldn't have asked the brown popper for help. Shane will reply that the brown popper did not respond. Hastray then asked whether they had exterminated the grasshoppers. Shaml said it had been a hard time. Hastra pointed out that Shaml had also skipped his class when there were omens. Shaml replied he had been busy then. Shame will then say Hasfer was strong, and because he was human like Kenta, he could easily serve as a vessel. Hasher then made the giant gem vanish. Kenta was shocked, and Jamie will explain that Hasfer had been using it as well. Kenta wondered if it was a storage device, and if Haster had equipped it with standard gear, noting he was relying on Aqua and Sakura for the same purpose. He glanced at Kenti's familiars and remarked on how impressive they were, noting that he even had a Ketshai and a centaur. Hasfer was gesturing over Max and Ninny and toward Kent to show that those two had come with him. Haster asked if Kenta wasn't training magical beasts there. Still a beginner, Kenta said he shouldn't be feeling it so quickly. He also warned that Shadow Cut Mountain held many powerful creatures. Worried, he said he did not want to go closer to Shadow Cut Mountain. Hasfer asked whether Kenta wasn't aware of it and told Samuel to plan further ahead. he warned that failing to think things through could make them careless. Shaml will say it was tough, but he had carefully crafted the plan and was teaching them slowly because it was still early days. Grateful to Shamuel, Kenta said he understood what careless meant. Hester laughed, and Shamuel grew a little sad, wondering what he had done to Kenta. Afterward, Hester asked where they were heading next, and Ken replied they were headed to Bison, but were currently in Chester. Hasfer suggested that, since Kenta was unfamiliar with that world, Kenta should let Hasfer accompany him there and offered to protect him. He promised to share everything he knew. Kenta, excited, said he would love to go. Having Hasfer's support was reassuring, and Shen Walwandry of Hasfer was still the softy he remembered. They noticed Kenta was getting stronger, and he said he would rely on anyone he could because they could not survive on their own. Shocked, I couldn't bring myself to ask why when Hasfer suggested heading to the Shadow-Cut Mountains. Hasfer said Kenta would ride his familiar, and since he wanted a mount too, there were plenty in the Forest Sea, so it made sense to find out what the Shadow-Cut Mountains were really like. Frightened, Kentis said he did not want to go any closer. Hasfer insisted it was a great chance to meet the people of the Forest Sea. Kentis kept protesting, fear on his face, while Hasfer laughed. Night fell as they moved on, and he said it would take about 2 days to reach the mountain, so they should camp for the night. Kenta took out the tent and said sleeping in it with his familiars sounded fun, then pulled out a table and chairs, offered to prepare the meal, and asked whether he could eat human food. Hashtag said he was relieved because most of what Kenta carried was easy to transport, and Shangle added that Kenta's cooking was always delicious. Kent had decided to give me an extravagant gift. Tapping the spice jar lightly, he sprinkled the spices over the meat and set it over the fire. He thought higher heat would be better for it, and Hashtag asked him to use the gem for the fire. Kenta wondered what he meant by using the gem, as if he was explaining that the type of gem could change the fire's intensity. Kenta said he'd been tossing in the smaller gems. Hasfer handed him a gem and told him to use it, explaining it came from the brown rock toad, which had strong firepower and would last a long time. Kenta noted the gem wouldn't fit in the hole. Hasfer pulled out a gem cutter. Asked Kenta to put the gem inside. He explained the cutter would break it into 8 small pieces. They would need to cover and press it. When the gem broke into smaller pieces, it split cleanly. He picked one of the pieces, put it in the hole as fuel, and said it would provide high heat. Someone said people usually ask the guild or use special tools to split gems, so having a cutter on hand was useful, and Kent stepped aside, relieved. He then decided to prepare some bread soup. Hasfer said he was directly storing the cooked food. Kenta poured the sauce made from the meat, drippings over the bread and steak. Like Hasferate, he said it was delicious. When someone suggested he could become a chef, Kenta modestly replied it was a bit over the top. Ken should offer some of the food to Shaml. Samuel said while eating that it tasted great and that he was falling for it. After that, they continued their journey and reminded Kenta about the gem monsters. He pointed out that in the forest they could see different colors. Kenta denied it, but he had asked Shamuel how far Kenta's appraisal skill had been unlocked, and Shamu replied it was at the first level. Hashtag explained that people can usually see to the second level. Samuel unlocked the second level of the Kent appraisal skill. Kenta could see the different colors. He thought it might be a bird. Make clear it was the black mosquito water that only showed up at night. He said it flew clumsily, so they should wait for it to drop. Claws attacked them, and as they fought, Hasfer warned Kenta that poison would put him to sleep. He said the poison would put him to sleep for 10 days, and that the creature known as the Nightmare was a nemesis to adventurers that became prey to the beasts. After they handled the threat, it began to rain, and a gem monster would appear on rainy days. They reached a pond and were told it usually gave off a scent, but became muddy when it rained. A fish suddenly surfaced. They caught the fish and identified it as the brown murder fish, saying they could catch them right away. Kenta also started fishing with a lure. It seems really fun, and he was excited to fish there as much as he wanted. After the rain stopped, Hasfer told him they had to return to the sandy ground and warned Kenta that if they did not, the fish would go into a coma. Kenta was shocked and said it had already solidified. He told Kenta the sandy ground was bottomless and warned him not to cross it carelessly, because if his feet got stuck, he wouldn't be able to move, and if it rained again, he could sink and die, which made Kenta even more alarmed. Has used a small stone to show how quickly the ground would give way. He warned Kente to be careful around the sandy areas near the pond, and told him to remember this as part of the adventure. Hasfer suggested they head to the Shadow-Cut Mountains. Kenta was still scared, said he didn't want to go there and just wanted peaceful, fun days, and Shaml called him stubborn. Continuing through the forest, Kenton saw a vast sea of trees and said the plants here were completely different from those outside. Hasfer started preparing the rope to catch the monster and told Kenta to lay out the meat and set the trap for the hound. They slipped behind the bushes and waited. Shortly we'll cover how to approach the meat, and has to pull the rope again to ensnare its legs. Leaping forward, he sat on the creature and told Kenta to hit its nose with his weapon's sheath. Then he struck the hound's nose as instructed. After touching the creature's body, he asked if it could join their party. The hound had finally been tamed. Kent asked Shaml whether a familiar could be transferred to someone else. Shaml said that if the master agreed, Deco could arrange the trade. The hound's name came after Ken asked, and chose to call it Sirius. Ken called to Sirius and pointed to Hasfer, explaining that Hasfer was now its master. Hasfer introduced himself and greeted the newly tamed hound. Sirius replied that it was nice to meet him. Sham will add that Sirius was a rare variant, prompting Kenta to say it seems really cool. Hashtra thanked Kenta for his help. Continuing their journey, Kenta said Sirius would need a saddle, and Hasfer added that a gem monster was nearby. Ken began to wonder if he meant the caterpillar, but he quickly denied it. As they went on, they saw a tree move. Hashtra explained that a turtle tree was a turtle with a tree growing on its back. Kenta froze when he realized the ground beneath them was a turtle shell. Hashtra said that in the sea of trees they were easy prey, so the plan was to cut off the top to reach the nutrients stored there. This wasn't a tree at all, but a parasite. That was why it could be cut down so easily. After chopping one down, he got a gem. As they continued to cut, a whip-like tendril lashed out and grabbed Kent's leg. He tried to figure out where it had come from, and realizing that it was dangerous, he pulled out his knife. Despite struggling to cut the tendril, in the end he was released. His familiars rushed in to help. Kenta must hurry to join him, fearing for his life. He realized the whip had come from the tree and suspected it might be a variant of some kind. They cut the tendril and found another gem. He said Kenta was lucky the tree hadn't tried to eat him. Kenta replied that he didn't think a tree would try to eat him. Say it wasn't just a tree, but more like a caterpillar's bite. Pointing to a black kill worm on the tree, he said the turtle trees survived because of these creatures. Fascinated by the parasitism and how the tree acted as bait, Kenta thought about the relationship between the creatures and the trees, and Hasfer then suggested that Kenta take a piece of the large gem as a reward for surviving. Hasfer told them to gather more gems now. Kenta asked Aqua and Sakura to help them, then turned to Hasfer. Curious about the gems, he asked how they were managed and wondered if Hasfer could not use them all or wanted some for himself. He declined, saying he had plenty. But Kenta was then advised to always collect all the gems. Leave them near the ley lines so they can be revived. Kenta thought Shaml was probably collecting the grasshopper gems too, and Hasfer warned him not to throw them away but to use or sell them. Aqua and Sakura returned, saying they had finished collecting, and Ken went to thank them for their help. Hashtra noted that using the slimes was very handy. Kenta added that you can help the slimes clean their bodies. Nini caught a slime and brought it over. Kent obtained it and decided to give it to Hasfer. Shaml even gave the slime storage and purification abilities. They named it Mist and greeted it warmly. They continued on their journey. Kenta said the path was widening and told the guests they were approaching the tree folk village. Asked Ken to look ahead. He noted how peaceful the area was. On the path, Hasfer met an old man, and after exchanging greetings, they said it had been a long time since they last met. Kenta looked closely and noticed the old man had dog ears and a girl beside him had cat ears. He realized they had reached the Beastmen village, and an old man greeted Kenta and introduced himself. The old man said he knew about the world's crisis and had lost hope. Grateful, he wanted to thank Kenta for saving their world and apologized. Kenta wondered why the old man was apologizing. Shame will explain that Kent's soul was even used to help save the world, and that they understood everything that had happened. Kenta reassured them that it was all in the past, and he hadn't fully realized what was going on, so they didn't need to worry. He added that he had been traveling the world and getting to know new places. The old man led them to quarters where Kenta and his familiars could stay. Kenta entered the room and was struck by how spacious it was. While he surveyed his surroundings, everything impressed him, and he could not believe it was all made by hand because it seemed impossible for anyone to weave fabric that wide. Then the cat-eared girl appeared and asked if Kenta Headcom was with the beasts and clearly impressed. Kenta described Shamul's gifts and how Hasfer had helped with the hound, adding that he was currently learning from them, and the girl said it was amazing that he was friends with Shamul and that she was excited. When asked if he was a sage, Kenta shook his head and said he was only a beast tamer. Lut introduced herself, and Kent smiled and shook his head in acknowledgement. He told Hasfer to use the bed, but Hasfer insisted Kenta should take it instead. Kenta laughed and said he gave the fluffiest companions the best spots. Lut was still impressed and said it was amazing. She asked if she could touch the companions. Amused, Kenta consented. The old man came by and told them that night was falling soon. It would be unsafe until sunrise, so they should stay inside. He advised waiting until morning to go out. Kenta wasn't sure what was happening, and explained it was a custom of the Sea of Trees and that staying inside would be safer, so there was no need to worry. Lut worried about getting locked out, and Kenta apologized to her. Lut asked to stay with them that night. Kenta agreed and asked why it was important to stay indoors at night. She explained that at dusk, the world in the Sea of Trees changed. Day belonged to people of light and night to the beings of darkness. Venturing outside would mean being consumed by dark beings. The night was dangerous, and their safety couldn't be guaranteed, so she suggested staying inside, and Kenta said the dark residents sounded terrifying. Lut nodded and said she had never seen them herself, but the scariest of all was the Dark Eater, a bear-like creature that dragged its victims into the darkness forever. Her words sent a chill down Kenti's spine, and she laughed at his reaction. Lut described black, cotton-like clouds silently engulfing everything from behind, deepening the ominous mood. Kenta quickly said that it was enough. Hasfer reassured him that they would be safe as long as they stayed inside. Ken decided it was time to eat. They took out the fried chicken for dinner, along with fresh vegetable soup and fruit for dessert. Excited, Lut asked when Kent had made all of it and whether he had used some cloning technique. Kent said he had kept the food fresh in his storage. Then he asked Lut if she could eat it as well, and she eagerly tried the food, saying it was delicious. Then he fed some to Talon. Lut said Talon was lucky to always get the same meals as Kenta. After dinner, Hasfer brought out some drinks. As they drank them, Kenta said a drink after a long walk felt great, but he'd forgotten to buy any at the restaurant. Hasfer chuckled and said he'd bottled plenty of booze, so they should just enjoy it. Kenta said it was time for bed, and when he entered the room, he found Lut already asleep with the nanny. Someone has to lie down on the bed, and Kent has settled beside Ninny and Max to sleep, wishing them all good night. Luke woke with a start and was shocked to find Kenta sleeping beside her. He reassured her it was fine and added that Ninny and Max's fluffy fur was the best. Luke pulled the blanket over himself to sleep, and Kenta wished her good night. As he drifted off to sleep, he thought how comforting the day's fluffiness had been. He felt someone pass by outside the window. Nothing unusual happens. Kenta woke up the next morning to find Lut looking sick. It was likely because he had been sleeping with his hand on her. Standing up quickly, she said she would take the lead now that dawn had arrived. Ken will ask her about the dinner. But Lut only bowed to thank them for the meal and then hurried off. Watching her leave, Kenta stretched and told himself it was a nice morning. Nothing unusual happened overnight. When Hasfer woke up, he wondered if Kenta had noticed something, and Kenta asked what he meant. Hasfer laughed and told Samuel he had won, leaving him shocked. Bari asked Kintat if he knew why Lut had wanted to sleep inside last night. Kenta wondered whether she had wanted to be buried in the bluff, but she denied it. She admitted she had fallen for him. Kenta was shocked and wondered whether Lut was a boy, and Bari said Lut was a girl, which surprised Kenta even more. Hasfer asked whether Kenta had been unaware of that. Kenta covered his face and said it had to be a joke. Hasfer said he had planned to leave after one night, but was now wondering if they should stay longer. Kent refused and insisted they leave now. Asked why Kenta hadn't answered, and Kenta explained she was just a kid. One must respond that folk mature quickly, and Lut was almost an adult. If both agreed, there would be no problem. Taken aback, Kenta denied it, insisting it was too soon because he didn't understand love or romance. Shaml and Hasfer laughed at his reaction. Before they left, the old man gave them some forced fire liquor to take as a souvenir. Kenta thanked him, and the old man wished them a safe journey. At that moment, the Lut arrived. She called for Kenta and mentioned she would grow quickly. Kenta agreed should visit her again. While waiting, his hand said he was looking forward to it and hopes he would stay well. They returned to the learning area and met there for it. Ken said he wanted the same saddle the little one has and thanked him for it. Fort said he couldn't believe the sample beer stock was flying off the shelves. He promised to adjust the belt and asked them to come back the next day to pick it up. Kent agreed and they left. After resting for a bit, Shaml will enjoy the drink and comment that it is very tasty. Kenta wondered whether Shaml could actually drink it, and Hasfer explained it was only a temporary form for Shaml, so it was fine. He said Lesson had bars for large familiars, and the stew there was excellent. Kent tasted the food and said it was all delicious. At that moment, a man came over to look at Sirius. As he asked who the man was, he asked why the other man wanted his familiar. The man called them the famous Beastmaster and praised their impressive research on taming. Then he asked how much he should pay for Sirius. The offer stunned Kenta. He has firmly told him he was not going to sell, but the man insisted he would pay any price, and asked his question again. Hasfer refused again, saying he wouldn't sell. Then the man looked at Kenti's hawk and asked how much it cost. Getting angrier, Hasfer asked if the man hadn't heard they weren't selling anything. Disappointed, the man said he was going home, left his card, and asked them to contact him if they changed their minds. They did not know what he meant. He ignored them, and Hashtray said turning him down was the right call. Kent agreed because they were his family. Haisler looked at the card and said he recognized it as the work of Yucil Trading Company. Ken needs to ask about a famous company and explained that it was an old trading firm known for serving the wealthy. They also sold slaves and familiars. Kent wondered whether slavery still existed in this world, and Shaml confirmed it. Although buying and selling slaves was officially banned, some nobles still owned slaves as if it were nothing. Hasfer said Kenta had seen the beast man in the jungle, and those like him were prime targets for slave traders. He thought the loot might have been disguised as a boy there to avoid drawing attention. Kenta said he didn't want to get involved, while Shaml said that although he had created the world's box, he didn't interfere with people's lives. Now things are getting out of hand. At first, slaves were people with no other options who worked for the wealthy, but the focus shifted to capturing people to enslave, and those individuals were hunted. Shaml refused to let extreme hierarchies take hold, and now that they had overcome the crisis, they could plan for the future. He warned that anyone who messed with Kenta or Hasfer would get no mercy, and at that moment, Shameless' face turned wicked. Shamuel wore a wicked expression and said that if others made the first move, it would not be simple for them. Hasfer, looking just as intimidating, agreed with Shamuel, and Kenta felt frightened by their expressions. He said he wanted to avoid being a victim whenever possible and did not want to get involved in any conflict with people, even if it seemed cowardly. He also agreed with Kent's perspective, and Shamuel said he understood Kent's viewpoint, suggesting they observe the situation for now. Hasfer said that after they picked up the saddle the next day, they should leave him to rest, and he would go with Kenta to Chester and stay longer if needed. The next day, before the end, Kent arrived accompanied by his familiars. He spotted Hector and greeted him, saying it had been a long time since they'd met. Seeing Hasfer, Hector wondered if he knew him. After a brief moment of confusion, Hector invited him to come to a nearby spot. Once inside, they stood by a window and overheard the man from the previous night talking with the guild master, who said such actions didn't happen in the field and that transactions were left to each adventurer's judgment. The man said they were willing to pay, asked what the issue was, and then inquired about the cost. Someone suddenly offered to pay twice the price, and the guild master stood up and said it wasn't about the money, but that the guild was fundamentally a mutual aid organization, not a power structure that issues orders unilaterally. Able to recognize the guild master's words, the man scoffed, called it ridiculous, and said the guild master didn't understand profit and loss. That explained why the guild was in such dire straits. He ended the conversation and prepared to leave. As he turned to leave, the guildmaster ordered him never to show his face again. Then the man went back to the window and asked if that amount would be enough. Kent asked if the guildmaster meant him. The guildmaster told him not to worry. He said he always thought Kenta would attract someone eventually because he was too flashy, and asked if Kenta had apologized. Asking whether the Yucil Trading Company was a major player in that world. The guildmaster said it was the rest of them, and the Chester Trading Companies at the heart of it, while Upon ran a completely different company. Hasfer wondered aloud whether they should avoid Kent's Chester and head to East Upon instead. Kent agreed, saying it sounded like a plan since he would rather not deal with any trouble. Hector then asked whether Kenta had thought about selling his familiars to avoid the Yucil Trading Company, and Kenta replied firmly that he would not sell any of them. Hector, smiling, said Kent had truly cherished his familiars. He was glad they all had such a wonderful master. The guild master stood up, said the trouble seemed over for now, asked Ken if they could leave as well, and Ken thanked Hector before leaving the area. Hector told him that when times got tough, they would help each other, and urged him to hurry and go. Kenta then headed to Fort Shaw. He asked to stay until the saddle for Fort Sirius was ready, and Fort said that was fine since it would take a little longer. When he offered them lunch, Kenta eagerly accepted and said it would be great. Fort served a sausage and potato stew from his hometown. Hasterate thought it tasted very German, Kent called it delicious, and Ford said beer would pair perfectly with the dish. Then Fort fastened the belt on Sirius as Kenta was about to leave. Fort raised his fist, hoping the bonds would stay with him, while Kent waited at a distance, thanking Fort for his help. After they left the town, he has suggested they go a little farther away for a bit. Kenta is now writing on Max. Watch as a rope suddenly appears around Nini's neck. Reacting quickly, he cut the rope. Kenta wondered what was going on. A group of men on horseback rode up, and one said the cat had already been marked. Let's catch it quickly. Angered Kente drew his sword, but someone quickly told him not to use it yet. They needed to get further away from the city first. Ken should mention that they had no choice but to run. While they fled, can't we get a spot at the lake? Note that they were told they would have to leap over it. He told his familiar to unleash its full power and leap across. They succeed in clearing the lake. The pursuers fell into the sand. The man who had been chasing the familiars was among the pursuers and shouted at Kenta to wait. Someone assured Kenta they had shaken them off, but he still wondered if everything would be okay. Hasfer asked if Kenta was truly worried about their enemies, saying it was odd for Kenta to show that level of concern. Ken replied that the pursuers would have trouble breaking free because the sandy ground was shallow, and since they weren't alone, they'd be fine. Just as he was about to say more, Hector rode up on horseback. With assistance, Hector greeted them and Kenta acknowledged his arrival. Having Hashrest Hector present, they could leave the follow-up to him. Hector agreed and said he would send a message to the guild, so help would arrive soon. Kenta thanked Hector and said he couldn't thank him enough. Hector said Restam was their hometown and they'd always help fellow adventurers if anything happened. Cantor agrees without hesitation, hoping their bond stays strong. He reflected on his own town. At the place he had to protect, he felt a twinge of envy for Hector and his group. Hasfer then suggested they head east toward Upon. Kent agreed and was ready to move forward. That same night with the rest of the Adventure Guild, Hasfer went to see the guild master. When the old man asked about Kenta, Hasfer said he had gone off on a small side quest. The old man said it had been quite a wild ride, that Hector had been laughing his head off, and that he wished he could have seen it too. Hasfer, carrying a small girl with Shaman on his shoulder, asked if there had been any trouble afterward. The old man said he had no idea. Hasfer sighed that he wished they could have confronted their enemies head-on. The old man noted they were not foolish enough to cause a ruckus. They then asked if the guild could help with anything, but the requester has firmly asked the guild to stay out of it. As Haster left, the little girl asked whether he knew they were being followed. At that moment, two men stepped out in front of Hasfer. After apologizing, they threatened to kill him. Immediately, Hasp wondered whether they were clients of the Yucil trading company and quickly realized it was a trick. With a swift motion, he must restructure both men. Angrily, one of them grabbed the other's collar and growled. He rebuked them for acting like fools who could not judge their opponent's strength. Terrified, the men ran away quickly. Hasfer wondered if that was everything, and Shane will thank him for handling the situation. Turning to Sharam, the little girl, he asked her to help, and she agreed. In a castle, Dragon sat on his throne and told a man named Claris he knew about the many misdeeds he had committed. The dragon declared he would not let Claris abandon his duties, and that Claris must face the consequences of his sloth and greed. Trembling, Claris begged for pardon. The dragon replied that if he stopped forgiving, he must immediately make amends for all the wrongs he had done. Shocked, Claris said this was a divine revelation. The dragon ordered him to end all dealings with the Yucil Trading Company and free all the slaves at once. Shambles stayed by the dragon with Shurim and thanked Shurim for the help. Shurim said they should stay cautious for a while longer. Shamble agreed and said he would check in now and then. He announced he was returning to Kenta and told Shurim to handle the matter while he was away. The next morning, while Kenta still slept, someone tried to wake him up. Kenta wondered if the person was alone. Maybe Lapin or Shaml. When he woke up, he realized it was Sirius. She said she'd figured out how to wake him up. Have Ken mention that the floor was very fluffy. Rising to greet everyone, he stepped out of his tent. Ken said Hasfer had returned to the rest area yesterday, but when he saw another tent, he said he hadn't expected Hasfer to buy one as well, and Hasfer replied that it seemed like a good idea, so he had bought one too. Ken should set the table, then ask Sakura to bring out the bread. He asked to put whatever he liked on it and enjoy it. It satisfies a craving and can be added so they enjoy many different flavors. It felt shameful but relieved to see it was only a taste test. He smiled as Kenta handed them something to eat. Asked what it was, Kenta said it was butter and sugar, something he often had as a child. Hasfer tried it and found it delicious. Kenta then gave them some sweet treats and explained they were like the cookies the others had. He asked to taste them, said they were incredibly good, and praised Kenta for knowing his flavors. After checking the map, Kenta said they would avoid Chester and head east toward a pond. He wondered how long the trip would take. Shamma said they were about 200 rils west of Restam. Kenta wondered whether rils was the distance unit used here. Shamgal explained it simply. 1 kilometer equaled 1 ril, and from Restim it was 1,000 rils to Chester and 2,000 to Eastapon. Kenta then wondered if a layout was used to measure anything smaller than a kilometer, like a unit equal to 1 meter, and Sham will say half a layout, and anything smaller were measured only by rough estimate. He then explained the units of weight. Kenta thought it was 1,800 rils to the east, and as he considered how long different creatures would take, Shaml said humans would need about 18 days on horseback or 40 days on foot. Skipping Chester would make the trip even longer. Shamil then asked Kenta if he wanted to learn about the transfer door. Pointing to 25 locations on the map, he said he had visited every one. Ken asked whether he could move from one door to another. Shamil confirmed, saying it was a special door only certain people could use. Shame will suggest we leave through door number 2, near Chester. Kent agreed, saying it was very convenient to reach Bison in the blink of an eye. Shame will ask whether they should go now. They hesitated, then agreed. He remembered the promise he'd made to travel the world with his familiars and enjoy the journey. He told Shamil he wanted to travel rather than take the shortcut. Shamil nodded, as he had expected. He said he thought he might sail out. They would avoid the transfer door and experience the journey together. The familiars set out to hunt. Kenta studied the map and noted that the country was vast. His homeland, by comparison, was smaller than Restam and Eastapon. He wondered if it was a small island nation, but it actually covered many islands and countries. Hasfer explained that it was a multicultural world. Kenta said his country was relatively peaceful, but not a paradise, because it had experienced many international wars. Hashtag explained the government was city-based, but still considered a single nation, and Ken found that idea interesting. Pointing out that wars between nations were costly, Shameful said the military's main role was safety and maintenance, and he did not want conflicts to arise in the world. Both Kenta and Shaml agreed peace was very important. Seeing his family return, Kentis called out, "Let's go." He asked Hasfer whether he used anything for long-distance travel, and Hasfer said he usually walked or rode. In emergencies, he borrowed a great eagle. Kenta was shocked to hear this and recalled the 4th eagle. He explained the eagle had been cherished by a friend of the former war god. Kenta was amazed to learn a god was involved. He felt a certain aura and wondered if it was Falco's presence and if the eagle would let him ride it. Kent had turned to Falco and asked if he could request a favor later. He climbed onto Falco with his familiar beside him, wondering if they were all there. Bari, who had been hiding, appeared and said that since he could fly, he would follow them. Kenta wasn't sure, but told Bari he could join them. As they sift through the sky, a massive eagle appeared, asking Kenta whether he was the same person from another world. Shami instantly recognized the eagle and greeted it, saying it had been a long time since they last met. The eagle thanked Kenta for saving their world. Kenta asked the eagle to call him simply Bo's representative and to direct the gratitude to Samuel. Shamble was taken aback, not expecting Kenta to push him into the spotlight. The eagle wished them a safe journey and then flew off. While they keep flying, Ken said it was wonderful to be able to travel so quickly and that they would arrive in no time. Shamel called out, urging him to look ahead. He suggested we go there. They could tell they had reached the transfer door. Shamgal told Kenta the door was normally invisible and instructed him to close his eye. Then blinked twice. When Kent followed the instructions, the door shifted and turned into a rock. Touching it, he felt it shimmer. Shamuel confirmed it was the door's normal appearance. Then he told Kenta to blink his eyes 2 more times. After that, the door reappeared. Shaml explained that it was technically an illusion meant to hide the door from prying eyes. Compared with Kenta's world, matter here was less stable and often looked different from how it appeared. He said it was fine and suggested they go inside. Shaml told him to touch the door with his right hand. That would set off a mechanism that took them downstairs. They all started down the steep staircase. We can't help noticing that it was very long and steep, and someone told him not to trip. When they enter the room, it couldn't have felt like he was in an elevator. A door caught his eye with the numbers 21 to 25 on it. After you press a button, everyone stepped inside. Samuel then asked Kenta to press the button for their intended destination, and Kenta, knowing exactly what to do, pressed it easily. Hashtag asked if Kenta knew those mechanisms. Kenta said he was used to them. Hashtag nodded, impressed, and said it was perfect. They finally reached their destination. As they stepped out of the room, Shame told them the stairs led to door 2. They headed upstairs. Finally, it emerged. Has noted that they had reached the first shrine. Kenta wondered whether it lay to the east and whether they could reach it. When Kenti's familiars entered the town, frightened people began running away. Guards soon arrived and blocked Kenti's path and asked if he was attacking in the east. They warned him they would not forgive those actions. Kenta explained calmly that they were not enemies but adventurers, though the gods might not believe them, but must step forward and urge the guards to calm down. When Ryan saw Hasfer, he said Hasfer had grown a lot since they last met. Hasfer thanked him and replied that Kenta was a legitimate adventurer and that all of them were his companions, so they should be allowed to pass. Although the guards still hesitated, Kent turned and showed his adventurous cards. He assured them that everything would be safe, and Ryan agreed, apologized for the sudden show of force, and welcomed Kenta to West upon. At last they entered the city. Kenta pointed out it was even bigger than Restam. Hasfer suggested they head to the guild first. Kenta asked whether Hasfer knew East upon too. Hasfer said he'd visited every 2 or 3 years, but this was his first time arriving from ground level. Kenta then asked whether Haster had flown in. Hasfer looked puzzled and said a wide river lay between them. Kent immediately guessed he could come by boat, and Hasfer nodded to confirm. He said he would guide Kenta the next day because it was getting dark. The group kept going until they reached the guild. The young receptionist greeted them and asked why they had come. Kent showed his adventurer's card and said he'd like to register as an adventurer. The receptionist took the card and slid it into the machine. It was returned to Kenta. When Kenton stepped back, he noticed it looked like the point card. Kenta asked to use the guild's lodging, requesting 2 large runes, and the boy agreed to accommodate him. Just as they were about to leave, Kenton noticed Hasfer reach toward Minnie as if showing affection. Kent told everyone to rest for the night and said they would explore east the next day. The following morning, Kenta opened his eyes and greeted his familiars. The room felt incredibly cozy, and he liked it. Entering the room where Hasfer was, he said good morning and asked about breakfast, and Hasfer said he had already eaten. Kent also decided to eat and told Hasfer he wanted to explore the town and stock up on supplies. Hasfer agreed to show him around. When they reached the merchant's place, Kenta suggested they sell the gems. They agreed to buy the gems anyway, even after Kent mentioned there were many of them. At that moment, a woman approached Hasfer and said it had been a long time. Ken was captivated by the woman who introduced herself as Diamond, the guild master. She asked if Kenta was the gem guy and if he could handle 2,000 gems. He wondered whether any of them were rare. Diamond told him to just give her all of them. Afterward, you cannot present a large number of gems. He noticed Hashter Singh seemed off and asked what was wrong. Hashtag said someone had been following them, but there was no hostility. Kenta was shocked and asked whether he had noticed, thinking it might be the youthful company. He confirmed it then, not sensing the tension, asked what had happened. Hashtag said it would be safer to come east from Restam to avoid the young crowd. Diamond wondered if they were being followed. She mentioned hearing troubling things about them, and although they were flashy, their branch was rumored to be closing down. One might think it's not a big deal. While they walk through the streets, many people are afraid of Kenti's familiars. Reassuring his familiars, he said it was perfectly safe and they did not need to worry about each other's reactions. Later, they stopped at an old woman's stall to get a bite, and she greeted them warmly. Kenton noticed rice was being served. She said it was soft rice soup, and he thought it was rice porridge. She gave him a bowl to eat from. When Ken bit into it, he grew emotional. On closer inspection, he noticed the dish had seafood broth and the sweet smell of grains. The taste was so delightful it moved him, and he immediately decided to buy more. Kenta then gathered all the ingredients. Pleased with how comforting the meal was, he bought a lot of meat buns and rice. Aqua and Sakura then put all the items away. Hasfer mentioned one more guild for Kenta to check out. Kenta was surprised to hear about yet another guild. Hasfer led the way and showed him where it was.